Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 342, part one of our two-part Green Lantern special. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, all will be well, and the Duke of You Know. On this episode, we're going to be joined by longtime friend of the show, Myron Rumsey, as we discuss everything Green Lantern. We start off first with a casual discussion about the recent news about Geoff Johns leaving the book and some speculation there. We also have a discussion about the cancellation of the very cool Green Lantern animated series and our thoughts on that. Then I posted some of the DC news that's come out this week about the new creative teams that are on the Green Lantern books. And we recorded a segment before that covering the first of a two-part look at what's currently going on in the Green Lantern books, where we take a look of everything up to the Wrath of the First Lantern, that big reveal at the end of Green Lantern issue 16, Green Lantern Corps 16. We also take a look at the annual for Green Lantern Corps. And we take a look at Red Lantern's number 16 on this episode. In our second part, which is going to come out next week, we're going to take a look at the current releases, issue 17 of the various Green Lantern titles that came out. And we're also going to take a look at that book Threshold. So we got a lot going on in this episode and the following week to kind of bring us current with the big events that have been going on in Green Lantern. We also have some listener voicemails on this episode. So without further ado, we are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, this is a great month if you haven't been checking out their website and you are a big DC reader. They're once again offering that 50% off bundle of all the 52 DC titles at 50% off. That gives it $83.74 to get all 52 books. They are also offering, speaking of 50% off, all new DC trades and hardcovers, so any of these ones you want to pre-order at 50% off. It's a great opportunity. Times are tough. We're all trying to budget our money. It's a great chance to go over there and get your DC books at 50% off. Go jump over to that website and do that. At InStockTrades.com, they have a ton of DC hardcovers and trade paperbacks from the Green Lantern universe. Just for an example, Green Lantern War of the Green Lanterns, 45% off, $16.49. That's a $29.99 book at that deal. They also have the trade paperback of the same series at 45% off. It's $16.99 regularly, $9.34. So if you are a newer Green Lantern reader, this is a great opportunity to stock up. Green Lantern Revenge of the Green Lanterns trade paperback, $12.99 regularly, 45% off, only $7.14. That collects Green Lantern issues 7 to 13. It's a great opportunity for you to jump on board if you haven't been there, or if you've been saying to yourself, you know, when I got my singles, I would love to have that handy hardcover or trade, just to be able to grab some of my favorite issues and be able to read them at my leisure. InStockTrades.com is your source for this. Every time that I turn around, there's always something going on up there where they've got a 50% off deal, running on a 45% off deal. Just a great way to stock up. Remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. So I want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
I'll speak in squirrel. Now, if your mind isn't evolved enough to handle it, let me translate to the humans who are listening. Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on the show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Jim, you need a napkin or something? It sounded like you were frothing. And with that note, let's talk some comics.
Raging Bullets Podcast. You like comics, you like free, you like us.
Joining us once again is longtime friend of the show, Myron Rumsey from the blog of OA. And I want to welcome you, Myron, back to Raging Bullets.
Sean, Jim, thanks for having me back on board. It's been a while. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. It's great to have you back and talk Green Lantern. Actually, one of the things we have to start off with is in the time that it's been since we've last talked, there's some big news in the Green Lantern front with Geoff Johns. This is it. You know, we're counting down to his last issues on Green Lantern. I didn't see this coming. How do you guys feel about that, Myron?
Well, you know, it's funny. There for a while, Johns was saying, you know, I'm going to write Green Lantern until I retire. Obviously, that's before he got into the position he did as the chief creative officer for DC Entertainment. It's got to be a lot for him to juggle, and it's kind of bittersweet to see him go. But, he's going to end it on a high note. And, as much as there's Geoff Johns leaving, the entire creative teams are being shuffled around, and who knows who's going to be in charge. I'm sure we're going to find out soon. I fully expect Peter Tomasi to be on the main Green Lantern title, but maybe I'm just wishing.
That is one of my big concerns. I really like the team on the Green Lantern books. So I guess I'm not really so worried about Johns leaving, and I don't mean this in any way. First of all, his contribution and the framework that he set up, you can't argue with. But when you've got like such a wonderful team of people that have been working together, and Tomasi, like you said, and Bedard, and I mean, there's some great creators that have been associated with this universe. I'm pretty confident in its direction, but if they all of a sudden started announcing, and besides Geoff Johns, we're also losing, Johns, I think one of the things I'm encouraged about is I'm enjoying his other material. Jim, I'm sorry, you know what, Jim, how are you feeling about this? Where's your thoughts on this whole direction? And
well, my thoughts are a little bit kind of skewed in multiple directions. One, we got a great run. We've got some fabulous stories, and it's sad to see him go because of what we've gotten, and just in my head thinking, well, the different stories we could have gotten that now we'll have to wait and see where this goes. But on the other side of it, there is a bit of an excitement whenever there's, with me, change comes. I have issues with change sometimes, but I also, in the back of my head, I do have that excitement as to what's going to happen next. Who's going to take over? There's the little bit of, excitement and seeing where it's going to go. Who's going to, head it up? What's going to be the direction? So I think it's a combination of sad to see him go, but also curious, excited, just anticipating what's next now.
Would you want to follow this run?
Me personally? Oh, of course. Sure, I could do it. No problem. With one arm tied behind my back, I could write it. No, I would never want to follow a run like this. This is an epic run that I feel really bad for the person who has to follow this. Even if they go with someone like Tomasi, who's an amazing writer, he's going to have some hard shoes to fill, just because you're going to automatically compare to the previous stuff. Yeah. And you're going to start reading the stuff. I know I will. I'll be reading the story. I'll be enjoying the story. But in the back of my mind, I'll be thinking, how would Geoff Johns have handled this? Would he have gone this route, or would he have gone that way? And you're going to get that for a while until the new creative team can get plenty of time in there, locked in and established with who they are.
Myron, what about you? What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I think whoever steps in has some big shoes to fill, just like Jim says. This run for Geoff Johns, you're talking since 2004. This has been a mythology-defining run for these set of characters, and for anybody to walk in, that's kind of a tough thing to fill. And that's kind of why I think my expectation, and I have no inside knowledge, but my expectation might be that Pete Tomasi takes over, just because he was part of this creative team, and really he was one of the creative forces behind bringing the Green Lantern Corps back in the day. He was an editor at DC at the time, and he was one of the driving forces for Green Lantern Rebirth. So I kind of see him being really more than capable of steering this ship going forward. If it's not someone like Pete Tomasi, or not somebody who's familiar with those characters, boy, to get 2 or 3 creators to work on this set of 4 books and have the same kind of connectivity is going to take them a little while. And I think we as readers have to kind of give them a little bit of slack to develop that synergy between the creators.
I think Pete Tomasi is a key focal point into that. I think he and Bedard and Johns, the working together on these books has been. And I'm not ignoring the Red Lantern book. I'm focusing on the 3 core Green Lantern books first. Because Red Lantern, it's a part of the universe, and this isn't dismissing it at all, but it's clearly focusing on one core, which has its own unique flavor and feel. But you really have got, with what Johns has done since Rebirth, and then the whole creative team, everybody, and I'm talking about all the writers across the board, they've taken a franchise that before you didn't look at in the same light that you looked at Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, as far as name and brand recognition. On the comic book world right now, the Green Lantern books, in many of the arcs, have been where it was at. I mean, you've got things like Blackest Night, which was, and Sinestro Corps War, these are universe-spanning events where they were the ones that, like, you're like, wow, that's the thing to be reading right now. And these are Green Lantern-driven events, not Batman-driven events, not DC Universe-driven events. These were events that were kicked off first in Green Lantern titles. That, to me, was the incredible, remarkable change with what has happened with this run, is what it's taken that brand, in the comic book world, that brand franchise, and done with it.
Yeah, I think if there's any anxiety, it's over without someone like Geoff Johns behind the franchise. Will it lose its stature? Only time will tell, but I'm trying to remain optimistic.
That would be, for me, I would not want to see that happen. And I've got faith in the current, like, let's say we don't bring in a new creator. It's just the people that are current, and I shouldn't say just, I want to be very careful in that, because my respect level for the creators that are currently working on these titles is through the roof. If you kept this creative team and they have the direction, maybe they do bring in an extra person just to get new creative juices flowing in this whole universe. I've got a lot of confidence in that direction moving forward. And as long as the events are big and they follow, like, you got to make sure you follow up what's just happened now with a build that feels just as relevant, just as big. Like, Green Lantern to me has never stopped since Rebirth. There has not been a down time. Even when it was in between big arcs, these big events, there was always this feeling of what is this building to? What is that building to? You looked over here and there was something going on this side of the universe with Larfleeze, and it connected to what was going on in this new exploration that they're doing in New Guardians of this, these different, bringing these cores together, and then Guy Gardner exploring crazy zones, and there's always something huge going on, and you didn't realize that all of those threads would eventually be interconnected. In some way, they would converge. That has been the brilliance, I think, of the way that these books have worked out. Things that you thought before were, like, very isolated in what was happening with them actually had these little tethers that had been connecting them all along, and we see the payoff of that. I like those surprises. That has been something that I found has been a great, and I think moving forward with the universe, they need to find ways to keep that in, where you feel like, these books had their own little isolated events, but they really were a lot more leading to each other than we ever realized. And that's something I've really enjoyed as a reader, being able to read each book independently, and when they converge, whapping yourself in the head and saying, I should have seen this happening all along, that they were going to come back together.
Yeah, and with me, I'm wondering where does he end his run with? Because it's going to end on a huge note, but it's like, how do you end a run like this? How do you pick a point in time to go? Are there still going to be some dangling threads? Are there still going to be some plot stories that the next creator is going to inherit? Or is there going to be that plateau point and that moment where, okay, now I can step away? Because we only got 4 issues until he's gone. So within those 4 issues, how much stuff are we going to get? Are they going to completely explain everything we've already led up to this?
That's a great question, Jim. Yeah, it's hard to say. I expect someone like Geoff Johns, who's a consummate professional, to leave the toys in good stead when he hands them off, maybe with some of his ideas for whoever takes over. But I think key is who's going to be the shepherd for the franchise, and is that person going to take the ball that Geoff Johns gives him and run with it, or is that person going to kind of go their own direction? It'll be interesting to see. I fully expect at some point we'll see Johns writing Green Lantern again. I know he's taking Baz with him to Justice League of America, and I expect that we'll see John's name connected with the Green Lantern franchise again, if only in guest issues or something here and there. But I don't think he's done with the character. But so I think he's going to leave things in good shape. But it wouldn't surprise me to have a couple of dangling threads out there somewhere.
Well, he's not, because of the Justice League books, because he's already got Baz that he's going to be dealing with in Justice League of America, and as he alluded to in his exit speech that obviously, at some point, Hal would be making, he said, I see Hal making an appearance again in Justice League. So, he's still going to be touching on these characters. That's one of the things, I like the idea that he's doing this focus on the Justice League books. I'm not to say to diminish the Green Lantern books. I think what's really important for DC to do is, first of all, preserve this franchise. You've got to make sure to put somebody in there who can work with the writers who are already there to continue to develop the kind of high-impact, high-energy storytelling that matters, that we've all become accustomed to, because these have become must-read books. Whatever kind of Green Lantern fan you were before all this started, it's certainly taken it to a whole new level for all of us. And I think taking people who are new Green Lantern readers with classic Green Lantern readers and people who fall in the middle and put us all on the same level. We've got these amazing, terrific stories, this appreciation for the characters and the world. You can actually have arguments over who your favorite Lantern is because they're all in play, which I think has been remarkable about all this. They've really done a great job of I'll take one, John Stewart. There's a Lantern who is really in the background, who I think they've done a great job in the last 2 years especially, of starting to bring more into the forefront, giving him a really relevant, unique identity that feels true to him, where I feel like he's a standout Lantern the same way that the other guys were. He's no longer the guy who's in the background that like's retired, and I didn't have any problem when they did this, but he was the retired guy who was like drawing buildings and stuff like that, which I love that aspect of the character. But when you see him now bringing all of those skills, including his military background, into the Green Lanterns, he's now become a character who is every bit as much an elite player in there as Hal, as Guy, as Kyle. And I think when and now you can have like a Baz in there, and I don't feel like any of these characters are going to get lost if they follow the same formula of unique arcs that spotlight these characters in and out. And I think that's something that really needs to stay in play. Is I want to feel like I'm still reading about all of my favorite Lanterns. I'm still following their stories. I'm still feeling a sense of progression, and that their history matters. And that's something that's been very important to me, because with the New 52 changes, I've really felt like there's been a few changes to compress the timelines, but I still feel like all of the major story arcs that have been relevant and important to me have happened to these characters, and they really matter and have impact. So there's a value to the older stories for me as a reader, to rereading those, because they mattered and they could reoccur. And these characters who have been beaten, so to speak, are showing up again, having roles in all of this. We can't wait to see more Necron at some point, because he's got to come back at some point. But that's something about this world is, you said it before, Myron, the mythos has been expanded. The mythos has become relevant. The mythos, there is like this great, huge Green Lantern mythos that's there. As a Batman junkie, I've always loved the Batman mythos, that there was a history to this character, and there was, relevance to the history, and when characters would die, even if they'd come back, that those deaths and the actions that led to those deaths matter and have relevance. Everything here in the Green Lantern books that has happened to various members of the Corps throughout has still a resonance today and now. And characters that were very small in the history of the Green Lanterns, but maybe had a really important place to a classic reader, are brought back in, given this huge, incredible spotlight, surprise you with what can be done with these seemingly throwaway concepts from the past that were really cool at the time as a one-off thing, that now today have led to major arcs. I've really loved that part of it, that there's a lot of care going to DC's past and to the amount of creative, I think, in the past that have done cool things with the Green Lantern universe.
And I personally hope, before he leaves, we finally get Larfleeze's oath. I really just want to hear what he's got in his head for that. Because that's just, it can't be something as simple as mine. It's going to be something cool. It's going to be something that is just totally, completely, centered on Larfleeze and just on the greed and whatnot. So there's stuff like that actually, and that was one of the first things that, it's funny to say, it popped in my head. I'm like, we're going to get Larfleeze's oath? Come on.
Well, in the Larfleeze story is one of those things that I expect will probably be a dangling thread. We've gotten glimpses of his past and his family, and I don't think through the wrath of the first Lantern story arc we're going to see that resolved.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's something I am worried about.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. And I actually, you talked about before, like, what will he tie up and what will he leave for the other writers? I think as a creator, what you want to do is tie up your current arc enough that you're not forcing somebody else to finish something big like that. But you also leave enough of the mythos with mysteries and things like that that maybe you never had a chance to resolve, especially with the fact that, you're obviously still have a major role with the company, that you give somebody else the opportunity to eventually address and give to us as fans. Because you talk about, like, the worries, are people going to jump off because Geoff Johns has left? Well, if you leave enough there to tease people and entice them that they want to see more, you're doing a service to the new creative, whoever it is, even if it's people who are currently on the team that are being shifted into that role. You're still doing a service to them where you're saying, look, we're going to leave you guys excited because there's more to come. This is only the beginning. It's not the end. It's the beginning. I had this similar experience like when Mark Waid's Flash run, when Mark Waid left and Geoff Johns eventually took over. For me, it was, I had gotten so used to Wade's voice and the way that he wrote Wally West and the big epic storylines that were going on there that I thought, like, how do you fill those shoes? How do you give this character something that's unique and defining? Then Geoff Johns comes in and does the same thing. But he didn't redo what Waid did. What he did was he took a look at what worked in The Flash and used his own skill set to deliver that same kind of high-impact, big arc storytelling that you expected from The Flash, but he did it with his own voice, with his own flavor, and it made it fresh and new and unique, but yet gave you that same sense of excitement and satisfaction. And that makes me think, wow, Geoff Johns has just delivered this, and thank you for delivering this amazing thing, this gift that you've given us with using your skills for Green Lantern. But there are writers out there that you can put in that spot. And if you choose the right one, and they don't try to be Geoff Johns, because that's the key. You don't want to try to be the guy that just left. You want to take a look at what worked. You want to honor what worked. But at the same time, you want to give the books your own voice. It's a careful balance. And I think the Flash example that I use is a really good one, where you're giving people something new and fresh that excites them while at the same time not throwing out the window what worked from the past. That balance is really carefully needed here. You've got to get that exciting writer, and there are people currently on the books that could do that. So I'm very curious to see what move they make next with the Green Lantern books, because I think it's a critical franchise for them on the comic book end, and I'm hoping that it delivers. And I have a lot of faith right now because while we're losing John, we've got great creative still there. Now, again, if everybody starts announcing they're going to be jumping ship from the Green Lantern books, I'm going to be scared.
Yeah, that's when you get worried.
They did do that. Tomasi's off Green Lantern Corps, Bedard is off Guardians, and Milligan is off Red Lanterns, all at the same time.
Are they really doing that?
Yeah. Yeah, if you read the solicitations for May, all of them mention it's the last issue of their runs.
Does that mean, though, I guess my question to that is, does that mean that they're completely done with the Green Lantern books, or are they shuffling them?
Well, that was my first thought. Some of the sites, I think Bleeding Cool said it was a mass exodus, and I think it's more of a creative shuffling. And that's why I said I think Peter Tomasi is going to jump over to the Green Lantern book. I could see Tony Bedard jumping over to Green Lantern Corps because he's so strong with team books. I don't know whether somebody's going to take on two books. There's lots of rumors and speculation out there right now, and the creative people, the writers and stuff had a thing down. I want to say North Carolina or someplace down south last week, and so we should see something soon. But yeah, all the creative teams are changing. Whether they're all leaving the series of books, the family of books, or there's a creative shuffling, that remains to be seen. I kind of take it that I can't see DC letting all of these creators leave all these books and just go to the winds. I kind of see it more as a creative reshuffling. And we may see some of these creators stick with the family of books, and we may see one or two of them leave. It's hard to say. All of them have announced that this is the end of the run on this particular title they're writing right now. And Fernando Passarin is leaving Green Lantern Corps as well.
See, I guess I've been under the assumption, and I guess maybe this is where I'm misreading and misinterpreting it. I took it as, because we've seen these writers change books before, especially with the New 52. We saw the writers make a shift. I'm not talking about Johns,
Right.
But we saw Tomasi switch to a different book. We saw Bedard switch. So we saw some switching going on at that point. So I guess I was assuming it was going to be more. I guess I could be wrongly assuming what I am, that they're being shipped. Because and I guess that all depends on what they announce and who they bring in. Do you guys think they're making a mistake not having an announcement ready of who's taking over?
I don't think. I'm not going to say a mistake because we still got plenty of time. It's not like they're. There's still plenty of time for them to announce it, and I don't think they need to say this person's coming on, because right now I think people are not planning on initially canceling it. Mm-hmm. They're going to wait and see who gets announced as being the person on the list, who's going to take over the creative teams. Now, they need a little bit of time before that person comes on, so we are going to need a little bit of a cushion. So they can't keep it secret up until the month before. They should let people know, but I'm not going to say a mistake. But personally, I would kind of take the excitement of this is going forward. Yes, let's I would follow it up immediately. Personally, my strategy would be that we're out, but I don't think it's a mistake not to. I think there's plenty of time to give that window. Where we're now talking about, okay, John's leaving. Yeah, it was great to see him. He was a great writer. It was a great run. Looking forward to, it's kind of building the anticipation of, okay, who's next?
Myron, what about you?
Well, I think it's only been a week since the announcements and the solicitations came out. So, maybe it's a bit of a calculated risk. There are some people that may be feeling anxiety about this whole thing, and I think following that up with who's coming on board gives you an idea that there's a plan in place. I think the longer they wait, the more likely it looks to the outsider that it's not it's a hastily made decision and they didn't plan it out. But I don't know. I have faith in DC and this franchise. They've spent so many years building this up to where it is now, that they've got to have a plan going forward. And like I said, I don't think that you're going to see all these creators, even though they may be leaving the respective books they're on right now. I think we're going to see some of that there just for the sake of stability. I'm optimistic about it, and I think they're going to do a good job. But I think the longer they wait, the more likely you're going to create that impression to some readers that this is hasty.
Yeah, see, I think that's kind of my worry, because I think nowadays it's not so much that I think, because I'm with you. I don't think that, I think this is a plan that's been in place. I think when they made the announcement, this was something that they already have an idea of where this is going afterwards and who's taking over. My big question, though, is the internet doesn't take much to get like crazy speculation going.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Hadn't noticed.
And that is always my big worry, though, is, sometimes that crazy, hasty internet speculation leads to misinformation that tends to trickle like crazy. Although sometimes by a big, massive announcement, that will be easily squashed. I'm reading right now that, I don't know how I missed this. Issue 20 of Red Lanterns is the conclusion of Peter Milligan's run on that, which I'm sad to see. But you know what? I'm sad and I'm not. I like that creators, especially with a franchise this important, have a chance to wrap up their story arcs. I think for us as the fans to know that there's going to be a capstone on it, that gets me excited for whatever creative change is going to come for myself, because I feel like the franchise is important to the company. The readers of that franchise is important to the company. So I feel like whatever direction they're going to go in next is going to have a big plan to it, recognizing that that's what, because I think right now the Green Lantern is a franchise that DC recognizes fans expect big long-term plans from. And if you don't deliver that, you're going to have a huge problem, because that's where you're going to lose readership who's come to expect that kind of epic. I mean, this has been space opera. Great space opera. And I want more great space opera from this franchise. It's stuff that, like, it feels like big screen level delivery. It feels like the old serials. It feels like, we're just kind of like, wow, what's going to happen next week? And you just can't wait for that next issue to come. And I need that from these titles. And I think that they they have to recognize the importance of this franchise and putting creators on there. If it's not shuffling, I don't know where you're going to find 4 creators to fill those roles. Do you guys, let me ask you this, do you guys have a dream writer you would like to see come to the Green Lantern books that's not currently writing on them?
I would love to see, I know this will never happen, but I would love to see Mark Waid.
Yeah, there's a good one. Yeah, I'd love to see that too.
Or Kurt Busiek.
Yeah. Jim, anybody?
Well, whenever people ask me any writer you'd like to see on a book, my first reaction is always Gail Simone, just because I know she's never written Green Lantern, and I think she would give a great take on the characters and just the Lantern universe itself. Especially, you give her kind of some free creativity to create some different lanterns that we haven't seen through Green Lantern Corps. Maybe some new rookies coming in, and I think she would have a great time with it. I completely co-sign on the Mark Waid comment. I think he would be wonderful writing this.
I'd love to see Gail doing Red Lanterns myself.
Oh yeah. That'd be good.
Yeah, it's funny. It's one thing I noticed that Myron grabbed 2 people that aren't currently writing for DC, which was interesting because both of those are creators who, like Mark Waid's work that he's currently doing over at Marvel. His Daredevil is just astoundingly good. So I would love to see, and Kurt Busiek, speaks for himself. I would love to see both of those writers back with DC working on those books. I don't know that I have. Everything you guys said, I agree 100%. I was thinking, too, of, like, James Robinson, because I like his long-form storytelling, and I think Green Lantern would be the kind of book that the Green Lantern universe would be the kind of universe where he would have fun playing in a sandbox where he could write long-form if they let him do it. But I kind of like him over with what he's doing in Earth 2. But I think that if they gave him a long run, we'd get to see the same kind of build to payoffs that we're used to seeing in the Green Lantern books because he's used to writing that way. He doesn't. I don't like his short form as much as his long form because I think he does better when he does these great creative builds. So I think he would do well there as well. But it's funny how these are books that I'm also thinking about teams. Jim, you touched on something though. How it'd be fun to get also a rookie in there, like somebody who we haven't seen before at DC. I wouldn't necessarily put that person in charge of the franchise, but it would be a great opportunity to maybe get that person in with some unique ideas and takes and have that person come in on one of the titles as a part of the team. Somebody indie or somebody from Marvel maybe that's never written for DC before. I don't know. There's a lot of different options to go with. I didn't really have an answer for that myself that I was thinking of. It just kind of dawned on me. I didn't know if you guys had a chance to think about who you might want to take over. That's kind of cool. One thing that Myron and I were talking about before we started recording, one of the cool things about the Green Lantern franchise has been its expansion into other media. Particularly, I love the animated series. I've been really liking the ongoing story there, the serialized story that's going on. They developed characters there that have become very, very important to me. I felt have stayed very true to the comic while at the same time they aren't beholden to it. And I want to clarify that. I think what's really important whenever you take a franchise like this and put it in other medium, that you really look at the core of what makes each character that's a part of the franchise work, bring that to television, but also give a story that's accessible to longtime fans where they feel like these are their familiar characters they know and love. It's the kind of storytelling that they expect, but also that anybody who watches it for the first time, if they're a fan of animation, can feel right on board and get a part of that. There's a nice energy there. This series has, in my opinion, done nothing but a home run with that. And I think as it's gone along, you've started to, especially with the ship, you've started to develop relationships with and the Red Lantern in it. They took 2 newer characters and have made them so relevant to the universe that I've really enjoyed that aspect of the series. And to hear that this is it, it's going to be done after this, there's a series that I'm hoping has a nice ending to it because it deserves it. But guys, how do you feel about that? Myron, how do you feel about that? I know this series has been very important to you. How do you feel about the closure?
Yeah. I broke one of my podcasting rules I set for myself when I started the podcast of and that was that I was going to keep it clean. And we were set to record an episode the day the announcement came out. It wasn't renewed. And my co-host Bill and I had a conversation about, geez, do we record or don't we? And I said, let's record. I'm going to give my raw emotional response to the whole thing. And I went on a tirade for about 5 to 10 minutes. And Giancarlo Volpe, the producer of the show, listens to my podcast, and he sent me a message on Facebook with my curse word tally. It was kind of funny, but I broke all my rules because it was so upsetting because this show is only getting one season, and it's just getting itself going, and it's done such a great job with the long form storytelling and creating these new characters and having this emotional richness that is kind of lacking in a lot of Saturday morning cartoons, and to see both this show and Young Justice go is really a loss. You'd think with Cartoon Network losing the Star Wars franchise, maybe they'd want to expand the DC Nation and add the 2 new shows in addition to Young Justice and Green Lantern, not supplant one with the other. But but yeah, I think it's a tragic loss for people that love the show and love the characters.
One of the things that I really loved about the Green Lantern series and Young Justice in general has been the great part is watching that block. They both have a very unique approach, yet they do exactly what I love about comics. They keep me coming back every week. There's a great sense at the end of each episode of there's been a finality to that particular story. There's been a sense of progression, yet there's also that hook that keeps you coming back, the longer story that's going on. Young Justice has a storyline that really continued from its first season straight on through. And it was something that if you had looked at where that went during that first season, I never would have thought it would turn into the direction that it went. And then you get the same thing with Green Lantern, where I agree with you that I felt like as this series has progressed, there's been this sense of, wow, they're just building on these characters more and more and building a foundation that can go multiple seasons where we're going to see this intense growth of these characters and they can keep going further. I hope that the animated series, and it's always one of the sad things about when an animated series ends, is it seems nowadays that the comic that ties into it tends to end as well. I hope that's not the case for this animated series, or that maybe the comic will go to a digital platform at this point, because I feel like this world that's been crafted is, ideal for me. I would love it to continue on television as an ongoing animated series. I love that. But I'm liking Smallville, for example, in comic book format because I still feel like I'm getting a partial fix to that television series. And I think the right creative teams involved in a continuing ongoing comic of that can honor the fans that have really loved this animated series and give us that continuity in a continuing book, because I would love to see more from this world. I'm very sad it's being canceled because I feel like you, it's only gotten better as it's gone along. Not that it was ever bad, but it's a testament to the people who are creating it that they deliver something that never has felt stagnant. Which, it feels like they're phoning it in, like this is their format, their platform, and like every episode kind of feels the same. It never has had that. Each episode's been unique in its approach and its scope and scale. We've gotten to see what it's like for a lantern to rely on the ring, for when the ring doesn't work. We've seen real emotional drama between people who shouldn't get along, with the Red Lantern and Kilowog and Hal, and 3 very different, distinct personalities, and then they throw the ship in there, who, talk about a character who came out of nowhere. I thought she was going to be like this very stoic, it's kind of cool that the ship talks. It's kind of like Kit from Knight Rider. But as her personality's developed, I keep forgetting that she's the ship. I think she's a member of the crew now. Which has been a big change. Man. Go ahead.
Aya rocks. Mm-hmm. She is a cool character, and I love this past week how the Manhunter was actually able to identify emotion within her. So she's somebody who's growing beyond her initial programming. And just the same thing with her and Razor, just that budding relationship between those two has me going, this is awesome. And then you hear it's going away. I'm like, what are you thinking? Come on. This is something that can last on its own. This is I would watch the Razor Aya show.
Yes, I would.
Just because those characters are that good. Mm-hmm. There's so much they can do with just those two. Add the rest of the core in there. And then we just had the introduction of Sinestro into this, and he's still a Green Lantern. I'm like, oh, come on. You've got so much stuff you can do with this. And it's one of those things that it angers me and it annoys me with television that, they don't see all the potential that they have there. They have these great storytelling potentials that, and they're losing the Star Wars. Well, let's really beef up the DC side. Let's run 4 shows. Let's take up that full 2-hour block now and make it a full DC Nation block. Let's really hammer this home and let's really make something. I can remember Saturday morning cartoons as a kid where I'd sit in front of the TV and watch one station the entire time because it had my Battle of the Planets. It had then went into Star Blazers. Then it went into I had my Thundercats. I had and G.I. Joe. All these different, and you go boom, 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 right one from another to another, where you got this power block. They got the chance right here to create it, to take it back, and it's like it's frustrating and it's angry and it just I
guess it was funny when you talked about Razor, and I actually want to see the two of them get together. I mean, probably more than anything, and actually have a go at it, because one of the cool parts of that is how she, in many ways, opened him up and made him more than the path that he was going down, and he recognizes that. But I love the subtlety of that. Initially, and for quite a long time, it wasn't in your face; it was teased. And we as the viewer would start supposing what was going on with the two of them, and the build to that, I think, has been absolutely fantastic. One of the things that's frustrated me with the handling of that, and it frustrates me with comics too, is the lack of advertising, or forgetting that, the lack of re-airing. It's amazing nowadays how many programs get re-aired over and over again, and different time blocks. So, if you don't catch the morning crowd, you catch the afternoon crowd, or you catch the evening crowd. With the amount of channels that are out there, it's often why is this not airing more? So it has a chance to develop a viewership. And I don't get that with animation sometimes on Cartoon Network. Because I'm a fan of, you mentioned Star Wars, I'm a fan of that show. I'm a fan of, obviously, this whole block has been fantastic. And I was surprised that, they put this on hiatus. I understand they were doing an anniversary and celebrating and all that, so I get that. But you think the way, as fans, we had no idea if you just watch television, you had no idea when they were going to start airing it again. That, to me, is kind of like the kiss of death for a show. You have no idea when new seasons are going to start up until it gets really close to it. And I think that kind of communication with the kind of immediacy we expect, or lack of communication, I should say, is something that, it's a little backwards. Because I think we as fans need that, because television audiences are fickle. And I'm traditionally, where if your show gets lost in the shuffle, there's so much it's competing with that you're going to start losing viewers every time if they're not aware of when they can catch it. So I think there was opportunities missed to grab viewers, but also opportunities missed to make sure you keep your viewers that are currently watching it, because it was good. I mean, darn good programming. And I think it missed, I don't know what the numbers were. I don't keep track of that. It's not kind of, it's never been kind of my thing. I always love hearing commentary from people on how they're enjoying it. I like when you guys talk about it. I do. It's funny. I'll listen to when people will do numbers, but that's kind of a quick thing for me. When people talk about numbers, I'm more interested in what is your viewpoint on it. It's amazing how universally, from people who I respect, Myron being one of them, when people would talk about this show, the love that they have for this show is Very strong. There's a lot of loyalty from the fan base to this show. Have you guys heard a lot of negative or heard negative from many places about this program? Because I really haven't.
Not at all. Not at all. Nothing but positivity and love for the show. And I think, though, Sean, you hit on a couple of crucial points, is that there was not enough marketing or push for these shows. You really couldn't find anything out there. I know when the Green Lantern animated series came out with the first set of DVDs, I saw them in a store for maybe a week. Those copies got bought up, and I haven't seen them again. So there's no market presence for the show. And then, you can't sit back and say, well, it didn't perform well. Well, you didn't give it the push, or you didn't air it enough times either. Why are we restricting it to just Saturday and Sunday mornings when there are other shows that air all the time? I think DC Nation could certainly be a much larger programming block. I'm kind of surprised when they launched DC Nation on Cartoon Network and they didn't launch it on CW, because Warner Brothers has such a built-in reference there. I'm really kind of surprised they're not doing that. I kind of wish they would take the bull by the horns and do their own thing and really put their products out there, because they've got a library of established shows they could air as well as the new content. They could get a lot of mileage out of Batman the Animated Series or the Superman Animated Series or Justice League and throw those into the mix, or maybe even some of the old stuff, like Super Friends, just for giggles. To add some of the old stuff back in again. There's such an immense library there. I'd love to see it live on in some other way. But yeah, I've seen nothing but love. And there are a lot of efforts out there right now. People are trying to get Cartoon Network to change their minds. Every Saturday there's a Twitter campaign to try to trend both shows, and you've got fans of both shows working together. I think they sent Hope Flowers and Reach soda bottles to Cartoon Network, trying to get them to change. I don't know what drives the decision making. I think it's a shame that there was no product in the stores really to support us, products in the stores to support both the shows. I mean, there was some stuff for Young Justice, but Green Lantern the Animated Series didn't get any merchandising other than some Happy Meal toys. I think that hurts the series, because I think in conversations I've had with some of the creators, that's really the value to the network, is how much product it sells. And you can't really judge a show if it doesn't have any product.
No, and it's funny, like, as a teacher in my classroom, I will put collections of, various television tie-ins and stuff like that, because it's all ages material, which is really great for me, because I know that this stuff is going to appeal, especially when it's tied into an animated series or something. And whether it's tied into an animated series or not, that's still existent. The kids pass them around like crazy. But in both cases, they love the comic material when I have it there, but I don't see a lot of recognition of, I do for other animated series where they've got lunch boxes and they've got cards and they've got toys and they're talking about the video game. It's like that stuff is all, and it's exactly what you're talking about, Myron. That stuff is all like either coming too late, because there's a Young Justice game coming out that I think bridges the 2 seasons, if I remember correctly, and that's still on the slate. But it's like that's coming at the end of the series, not like when it could be, because I think a video game like that is a great launching platform to get people to watch the series. It seems like, wouldn't you have had that in place sooner? And I know I know how video game development works and how much time that all takes. But why would you, when you have a game coming out for Young Justice, would you not have it like, say, let's go one more season to see how this works with that? Because we've got this automatic energy between the two to possibly connect them. So why are we not trying? I don't get that part of it. That on the Young Justice end, that kind of baffles me. But why we didn't see similar tie-ins with Green Lantern, the animated series? Because I do think that today's audience, knowing my students, they like being able to continue television shows or toys into the video gaming world and back again. My kids constantly talk about programs that they watch where there's a video game tie-in, or toys that they buy that tie in specifically where they had to buy something to connect to their 3DS, for example, in order to get the toy to play with their, to be able to interact with that toy in that world. I forget the name of the one that's really popular right now that they just started bringing into my classroom, so I'm going to just kind of move on from that. But there's a toy right now where they're connecting it to their 3DS, and they are Sky something. Anybody listening?
Skylanders?
Skylanders, very good, thank you. I remember one of my kids coming in saying, I got the Skylanders game, but I didn't have the toy yet. So they couldn't play the game. But this was something that, like, he had it, and classmates in class were telling him during indoor recess, like, what he needed to get and how to play the game, because they're all into having the toys that go along with the game. And it's, this sense of merchandising, which plays back into the point that Myron was making, that, like, similar to Skylanders, the Green Lantern toys would easily expand that universe to the point where the kids like collecting those things. We liked that stuff growing up. I still like that stuff. But from the marketing point of that audience, that's what you need to link that audience base, and I don't know why that wasn't done, why they didn't give it a toy line. Was there ever any explanation as to why there wasn't a toy line, or did they even look at it?
Mattel actually made prototypes, and they wanted to do a toy line, but the big box retailers that sell the toys, they kind of get a say about, if they're interested in a toy line, that helps sell the idea of having a toy line. And Toys R Us and Walmart both didn't want anything to do with the Green Lantern toy line because they still had movie toys on their shelves. So even though it's not even related, they kind of equate the two things as being the same, so they didn't want a toy line. So even though Mattel had gone ahead and started making prototypes, the toy line was never produced for that reason. Now, I think had Warner Brothers or Cartoon Network or whoever's in charge of that piece of it gone back and said, hey, look at the ratings, because they've been getting about 1.5 to 2 million viewers an episode. If they'd gone back and said, look, we've got great numbers here, the show will support the toy line, not the other way around, maybe they could have had another go at it. But I'm not sure. Nobody knows the decision making that goes on. Even the guys in charge of the show don't.
Yeah, it's especially with the series not being tied directly into the movie. I think I remember you sharing this. I've heard this before from you at some point. I'm surprised with the fact that it wasn't tied into the movie, that they didn't look at doing something, or like a restaurant chain. That's usually the biggie. Happy Meals was the one you threw out earlier. And my kids love that stuff. Being able to, and who didn't? We liked that too.
I still like it.
Yeah. So I'm very sad that series. I'm sad that series is going. I'm hoping that I know that they're doing the Batman series still, right?
Yeah, yep. They're still doing a Batman series. They're doing Batman and Teen Titans Go.
Okay, so with having those back again, I'm going to be glad to see more animation coming down the pipeline. With the amount of cartoons that are on now and the amount of days of the week, it used to be like Jim, you mentioned the Saturday block. You used to be limited to that. You're not anymore. So, you could have easily had those. And what I would have done, in all honesty, is linked the two new shows to the other two. Like, I would have done, like, Batman with Young Justice and maybe Green Lantern with Teen Titans Go. To change the block up and freshen it a little bit, and done them on 2 different days.
That'd be cool.
Just to kind of say, okay, we're going to get an automatic new audience from these shows who might be interested in them. So let's use that to maybe bring new audiences to these already established shows to see if we generate maybe some more viewership. And then yet you've got the established people who of both of those programs that are then jumping to the new programs. So kind of using them both to kind of feed each other. Because I know I would have been a fan of that. And I think the shorts would have been a good way to kind of... But I wasn't thinking the way you were thinking, Myron. If it had been on the CW, I like the idea of using some of the older material surrounding it as well. Because what you could have done is, as you expanded those blocks, not only could you have done these original shorts that they're doing, but Super Friends had a lot of short episodes that weren't the full length of a regular program that could have been done in between some of these programs as well. Sure. So there was, opportunities to then take older material and use them to kind of feed this a little bit more as well. And that's a great way to watch classic cartoons and make, again, a whole morning block where using the DC Nation shorts and, you make people sit down and actually, it's funny how I watch these programs usually back to back. And I don't normally do that. I usually prefer to watch my television programs where I'll watch, especially animated ones, where I'll watch 2 and 3 animated episodes together of the same series. It got to the point with this where I finally, I started watching them a little bit late in their runs. And when I say a little bit late, 3 episodes in, where I started watching them religiously. But once I started watching them religiously, I watched them back to back consistently because I liked the flow of beginning of the program, DC Nation short. End of the program, new DC Nation short. Leading into new program, DC Nation short. Watching the end of that program, there was something about that took me back to my childhood and the sense of sitting around on Saturday mornings watching that. The shorts mattered to me. The programs mattered to me. So I hope these series at least get a chance to get exposed to people through reruns. That I hope they don't just kind of go off into the sunset and we don't see more of them, because they've been so well crafted. They deserve to get a fresh audience that hasn't seen them the way we have.
It's a shame they don't let us be in charge.
Yeah, they did. Well, I think we as comic fans, it's funny how this animation discussion fits talking about comic books, because I think we as fans often get frustrated that our favorite books have this happen to them. You know, when we have that favorite title that all of a sudden, you're the quality's there, the writing's there, the delivery's there. Why isn't more being done to attract the audience? And moving forward, I think comics and geek culture media, we're seeing 2 different versions of what's going on here. We're seeing the people that are very well aware of how to use all of this social media and toys and games and all that in a way that's so interactive, and Facebook, and that's so interactive that people are constantly interconnected with that product. And we're seeing other ones where it's almost like they're going out of their way to keep them separate.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And I wish there was a way to make that more interconnected. I know you can't advertise on a, there's those rules where you can't advertise on a children's program for the comic book and stuff like that. I just wish there was a way to somehow connect those two, because I know my students eat that stuff up. And it's not so much about, I know for the companies it's about the dollar value, but for the kids, it's about being able to extend the experience. I don't know how many kids who watch the Green Lantern animated series are aware that there was a comic book that tied into it. And that's something that I find that's sad. I get it. You don't want television media preying on kids and forcing them to buy things that are making them feel like in order to watch this program they have to be reading this. I get that. I get that side of it, but I also feel that there's a group of kids who would read that material that did not get exposed to it because they didn't know that it was out there. And that's a part where I kind of get saddened as well, because I thought the comic tie-in was really good too.
Yeah, it's a shame that there isn't a lot of cohesiveness in tying all these disparate elements together, because you're right. I think they support each other. That's the silly thing is if they did a better job in tying all these elements together, they'd all perform better, because you'd have that cross promotion going on all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, is there anything else you want to say about the changes coming to Green Lantern, or speculation of the changes coming to Green Lantern, or the animated that we haven't gotten to?
No, I mean, Larfleeze is coming up.
Yeah.
Great molecules! They're programming the computers for a chain reaction to blow up that atomic pile!
So we recorded this episode. It was before we had the announcement that all of the creative teams were changing and who those creative teams were going to be. Green Lantern is now going to be written by Robert Venditti, who has been doing work over at Valiant for the very cool X-O Man of War. I'm very excited for this. And this is funny how these announcements started coming out. I was kind of worried who's going to be taking over. And you start getting that there's, art's going to be done by Billy Tan. Green Lantern Corps is going to be written by Josh Fialkov, who's been doing I, Vampire for DC, which is a very cool book, with art by Bernard Chang. Green Lantern New Guardians written by Justin Jordan, with art by Brad Walker. Justin Jordan's been doing Team 7 recently. Red Lanterns is also going to be written by Josh Fialkov with art by Alessandro Vitti. Larfleeze is going to be a brand new series written by Keith Giffen with art by Scott Collins. And if you go to DCComics.com, there's a really cool promo picture done by Billy Tan, just of the whole Green Lantern universe crew. And I'm really excited to see what's coming out of all this. I'm glad to see the announcements. You'll actually hear one of the things, I think we all as fans run into this position where it's like, okay, you're dropping your creative teams and switching them around because it's that transition time, which is normal in a comic book series. You know, kind of like the creative team's done their thing. They've done it so well. Who's going to be handling the mantle, though, of these books that have become very important to us? And I'm really excited for those announcements. And it's funny to hear us, after this, kind of speculate about where this is going to go, who's going to stay. I didn't know at the time of recording this that it wasn't just Geoff Johns leaving. I think I'd been so focused on the Geoff Johns news that I hadn't taken a look yet to see what was up with the other books. So I'm really glad now to have these announcements, and I hope they help you, if you hadn't seen it this week, to go ahead and check them out.
Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Brandon calling from New Orleans. I guess you might as well start calling me Brandon Bat Fan. Called to talk about Batman. I know you guys are going to be hitting on the, I think, number 16 issues. I just kind of finished up with all of them. And yet again, I just don't know how this stuff keeps getting as good as it's getting. I mean, they continue to surprise and deliver with all of them. I mean, even the tie-ins, the ones that you would say aren't so favorable, are still really, really good. I think the standouts are definitely Batman, Robin, Batgirl, and surprisingly the last issue of Detective Comics. I mean, let's talk about that one a little, with the impact of the Joker's on, the Joker on Gotham City. What would it have on these people? It's crazy to see them just kind of whacking out all over the city, some induced by the Joker and just the allure of what he would have. I mean, it's crazy. The dentist, and in the comic, the wacky dentist shop. I mean, that's pretty much my worst fear. I gotta say, I'm scared of dentists as it is. So I would not be going to that dentist shop. That would be the last place on earth I would like to be. Very creepy. Man, it's amazing. It's good stuff. Batgirl, the proposal. I mean, the craziness going on in there. And I guess you can finally say everybody's been talking about how Joker's so Leatherface-like now, and he goes ahead and breaks out a chainsaw to go ahead and, sew that title right up. He's got the Leatherface and he's got the chainsaw. He has, his journey is complete, as Darth Vader would say in that instance, to becoming Leatherface once he pulled the chainsaw out. But I'm impressed with Batgirl. I'm so glad that we got Gail Simone back. I know there was some craziness going over at DC. I'm glad it's all straightened out now, and we get to continue to see great stories of Batgirl, because even before this, she was delivering, I think. But you can definitely tell in the last two issues, she's starting to hit her stride again with Batgirl and starting to become very comfortable writing Batgirl, Barbara as Batgirl again, instead of where she was writing her as Oracle for so many years. So it's nice to see that she's finally, gotten comfortable with the character, and I think brought her right out in the front to where she needs to be. And my God, James, the creepiness of having that brother, I don't even know what to say about it. I mean, it looks like he comes in to save her. He double crosses her to save their mom. It's nuts. I mean, it's a good book. I'm glad Gail Simone's here. And of course, Joker double crosses him at the end and blows up. And let's hit on the end of all of the issues with the platter. What is in the platter, man? I hope it's not Alfred. I really, really hope it's not Alfred. That's the first thing my mind goes to. But I think they're going away from that. I mean, I hope so. I don't want to see Alfred on a platter. That's the last thing I want out of my Bat family. I mean, I grew up with Batman. Alfred's almost like a father figure to me. I was raised by a single mom, so I could feel Bruce's pain. I have a stepfather, and I look up to him. He became a big part of my life at 16. So I mean, if I lost him, it would be just as devastating. Actually, maybe even more devastating than losing a father. I think, because I know this guy had to have no attachment to me, and yet he took me under his wing. He taught me everything he knew about life, and, you know, he shaped me into the man I am today. And he didn't have to do that. The same thing with Alfred. I mean, he was just a butler. He didn't have to step up and be the guy that he was for Bruce, and did not to mention go above and beyond what he's gone for Bruce in the years that he's been Batman. So, oh, God, that's going to be heart-wrenching if it's Alfred on a platter. I hope not. But all of the issues tend to have seemed to end that way. Batman, Robin, Red Hood, Batgirl, they all end with the Joker holding the platter, which is actually kind of cool if you break out all your issues and you look at the different takes of the way each artist has drawn the Joker, and they really took that last panel to express it a lot and really show the detail that they wanted to put into their Joker, which is great. I think the one from Batman and Robin kind of actually looks a lot like Heath Ledger. It's, to me, I'm looking at all of them now, and I definitely think that one would be the Heath Ledger-looking Joker. But I was actually quite impressed with the way he was drawn in Batgirl. And, well, the big one, Batman. I mean, this is where everything happened. The horse ran down the halls with fire. The payoff for most of everything, you know, that we're waiting for, aside from the ultimate culmination with what's on the platter. But just Bruce walking into Arkham Asylum, the grand court, the people dancing, Bruce at his peak again, you know, quick thinking with the balls to absorb the water, to not have the electricity that's on the floor wired for these people that are dancing, because if they stop dancing, he'll shock them and they'll all die. I mean, it's pretty epic entrance. Of course, he gets the horse right after, which is Batman's what in the moment. I can't believe there's a horse running at me on fire. The big battle, I mean, you can tell. I've heard people complain that this issue kind of rushes. I love the pace of the issue, I think, because, you know, we've had the build-up for the last couple of issues, not to mention the tie-in. You know, Batman sees he's on a mission now. He's got his purpose. He's going to find the Joker, so he just wails through these guys so easily. I mean, even when it comes to his main rogues, Freeze takes down very simply Scarecrow, which, I mean, come on, you know, he would take down Scarecrow pretty simply. In most instances, even in the Dark Knight, when they fought, you know, Scarecrow had a weapon gashed into Batman, he was weak and still took him. So, but again, all to make it all the way to the end, to the big scene with, of course, the guards dressed as the Justice League and the big rogues, Two-Face, Riddler, and Penguin. Wow, how epic. How epic, trying to pull the chainsaw out like King Arthur. I can't believe it. It was crazy. I love the ride. In this issue in particular, the artist, the way he started to draw the deterioration of the skin, they all seem to be doing it a little bit, but Capullo has hit it perfectly. It looks like it's rotting away. It's discolored. There are flies defiantly flying around his face. It looks horribly stinky, uncomfortable. It's perfect. I don't know what the big plan is now, but I gotta say, I have eaten it all up. I've loved it all. And the fact that the Penguin wanted to get out of the cell in the very end, and the Joker outthought Eddie by putting the tranks in the coat that he got him, that's the perfect little sign to show that, you know, for everybody that's ever said the Joker is not Batman's polar opposite, the Scott Snyder has shown it right here with the planning that the Joker has just put into all of this, the big, you know, getting all of the Bat family together, getting the Robins together. And he was one step ahead of everybody, even the smartest Robin, Tim Drake, in everybody's mind. You know, the Joker and him were pace on pace with that issue, you know, talking things through in their heads. So, I mean, it goes to show the foresight that the Joker has, the same as Batman. Batman's known as the planner. Joker might be crazy, but he's a crazy planner, and this is Joker goodness here. So I just wanted to say great job from all of the writers to bring this epic story together. Great job with all of the artists. It was fantastic. I'm loving this event again and again. So Guys, love the show. Keep up the good work, and I'll talk to you later.
One of the things I've truly loved about doing this podcast, especially as we do like voicemail catch-ups like this, is just hearing the thoughts of our friends of the show who call in. And this particular crossover, this Death of the Family, it's funny how much outside of the podcast, I've talked about this with friends of mine that are more casual readers and just said, hey, this is a series that, when it's collected, you need to be reading. It was a really cool event. It's a great story that's going to have impact. And when I say it has impact, it's not always so much what obviously this one's going to have some resonation, quite a bit of resonation after it's done. But it's also like the rereadability of the story. Like, this is one I could see myself going, you know what, I want to reread that. And with how much comic material comes out every month and how much new material that I'm reading, it's often when I read older titles, it's things that I didn't read before. I want to jump onto some things that I just never had the chance to or the finances to, and they're being collected in a cool format, and I've heard buzz from it, and that's the kind of stuff I normally want to read. But there's those special stories that you want to jump back to and reread again and kind of delve into and just have that really cool experience again and maybe catch something different that you didn't catch the first time around. And this is one of those that's going to be on my stack of Batman that's going to fall in the category of things like The Cult, Dark Knight Returns, Killing Joke, stuff like that, and the Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale stuff. That stuff's fantastic to read. I mean, I can go on and on about Batman stories I love to reread, but this is falling quickly into that category of books that I know I'm going to reread again. And that's the great thing about Snyder's run. There's stories now that are being developed that are going to be those classics. And I'm glad that he had the same experience that we did reading it, where those outside titles, the ones that are, normally those are throwaway books. This case, they haven't been. And I think that's something that's been in the last few years especially. Tie-in titles, I think creators have gotten really clever if they are tying into a story to really enjoying that event and being a part of it and using it as a way to tell us something new about their characters. I really love how that's been something. It's not just with the New 52, it was prior to that in these events, and it's something that's outside of DC happening in Marvel as well and other places when they do their crossovers. I like that there's this main book that you can read to get the main story. But these side stories are things that you see the story that's going on from a different perspective. It's like you're riding along, in a car driving beside the big bus that's going by, that's the event. And you really get to see what's going on in the bus from a different angle. And for some reason, that's making these stories feel more real and rounded out. And that's something that is not just a testament to Scott Snyder, but to every other creative talent that has worked on this particular event. I think it just has that kind of impact, which is cool. Thanks for calling.
Hey, guys. This is Daryl down in Houston. I'm calling a long time listening to the show. Trust me, it got me through a lot of long, long days at work. But anyway, I was calling because I was just watching this week's Arrow on DVR last night when I was trying to help get my little girl to sleep. And so I thought it was a great episode. And I just had this really strange thought. Now, mind you, this thought came at about midnight when I was trying to feed my little girl her bottle. So, bear with me if it sounds crazy. But the actor, when I saw the count, now, the way the guy was acting and his voice inflections, things of that nature, it really, really made me think of the Joker. Now, I know, the Joker, of course, is the Batman, but I'm wondering with the Arrow universe, if they may be trying to take freedoms of either pulling in other characters or just maybe making new characters there that have similarities to other characters in the DC universe. I don't know too much history about Arrow, so, there could be a guy called the Count already in the original Green Arrow universe that I just don't know about. But anyway, I thought about that because of the guy's reflections. And I know a lot of the times the Joker's history is that he fell into a vat of chemicals and then he changed to the Joker. Well, I was thinking in this modern retelling, you can kind of say that, well, he wouldn't fall in a vat of chemicals because, OSHA standards has all the chemicals in big sealed containers with pipes and blah, blah, blah. Nobody would happen to fall into the canisters. But maybe some weird, crazy drug, hence the Count was drugged by Ollie with Vertigo. And then, so I wonder if they could be building up to where they have a Joker-type villain with the Count later, or maybe even their version of the Joker. So I just want to know what you guys' thoughts. Love the show, and hope you have 5, 10 more years. All right, guys. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for the kind words. And yeah, Count Vertigo, actually, it's the Count, and the drug was called Vertigo. Count Vertigo is actually a classic Green Arrow villain that's been around since 1978. He was created by writer Jerry Conway. So Count Vertigo has a rich history, and he's appeared in various different places throughout the years in various different titles. And so that's where that really comes from. He did join things like the Suicide Squad along the run as well. So he's one of those characters that's sort of been on the good guy's side, the bad guy's side. He was part of Checkmate. So he's one of those characters that has a rich DC history. So that's where he was coming from. I thought what they were doing is, and his powers actually, when you look at the drug, the powers that Vertigo had was distorting people's perceptions and balance and stuff like that, so that, they couldn't tell up from down and stuff. So I thought going to the drugs was to make kind of a more street level that fits the current TV show Arrow, but they were going also to pulling in a classic DC villain. So it was a neat touch. I agree with you, though, that they probably took a look at what people have been enjoying in film villains, and they use that as a vibe as well, seeing as they're doing, you're right, their own Arrow universe interpretation. So I like their balance of pulling from the classic villains that have been villains of characters like Green Arrow and Black Canary, because that's really who he was a foil for, and also bringing that character into what works on television and film. So I thought it was a nice little balance, but that's what it is. Count Werner Vertigo was who the character was in the comics, and that's what the reference is supposed to be. So very cool. I'm glad that it kind of motivated you, and you saw the ties into what's working nowadays.
Hey, Sean and Jim, this is Scott from Simpsonville, South Carolina. Just calling in to let you guys know I'm 2 or 3 podcasts behind, but I've been listening to your comments about the Death of the Family books, the Batman book, and all the tie-in titles. And I've been reading comics for probably 35-plus years, and I don't know that I've ever read a Batman title that has had me on pins and needles with every turn of the page as this story has. It's just all the way around. It's just been a great, great book. And it made me think about The Killing Joke. It's probably one of, if not my favorite Batman story, right up there with Dark Knight Returns. But this is making a play. This story is making a play for probably number 1 on my list, especially depending on how it turns out. Now, if they end up killing Alfred or something like that, I'm going to be a little upset with that. But all in all, it's just been a great, great story. And it made me think back. I remember back when The Killing Joke came out, there was a advertisement in the DC books about The Killing Joke, and it had a picture of the Joker, and he had his hands in his hair, like he was messing up his hair. And the tagline under it said, "Beyond evil, there's insanity. Beyond insanity, there's the Joker." And that is the perfect tagline for the Joker. And he is just crazy. The second point I wanted to make, I want to get you guys to give me your opinion on what's happening with the all ages titles with DC. I'm sure you guys have heard that the Cartoon Network has canceled Young Justice and the Green Lantern animated series, and I'm sure the comics, will soon follow. And then they're canceling Superman animated, the Superman Family Adventures title also. And those are 3 books that me and my 9-year-old son just really love to read together, really enjoyed. And it seems like to me that, I've always felt like that DC did a better job with the all ages titles than Marvel. They had Tiny Titans, and they had the Batman and Robin animated series, and they had the Superman animated title, and but it's kind of disheartening that they have or are going to be canceling all these titles, and that's what is getting this current generation into comics. My son, of course, got into comics because of my love of comics, but he loved Tiny Titans. I have a pretty much complete run of the old Batman animated titles. He loved those. The Justice League Unlimited book that came out, and it's kind of disheartening that they're doing this. And just curious as what your opinions are of that and what you think the future of the all-age titles are for DC. appreciate all the hard work you guys put into the show, and talk to you again soon. Have a good day. Thanks.
Yeah, I was kind of sad that Superman, like when Tiny Titans was canceled and they announced Superman Family Adventures, I got really excited for that because, you know, it was the same creative team. And they were going to be bringing that style of book, and it really basically was set in that kind of Tiny Titans continuity. So I was really glad that was continuing. I was sad that we didn't get another announcement of a title to replace that, because I think those books are really important. I'm a teacher, and I need titles I can put in my classroom where they're really written for an all ages age group. You know, they can take it home, they can read it in class, they can pass it around. Younger brothers and sisters, older brothers and sisters can enjoy it, and it's something that's safe for me for my classroom, and that's really drastically important for me to know that these are going to be safe materials. I love comics. I love the current continuity comics. They're written for me. The content of them aren't always appropriate, though, for my students in my classroom, so I can't put those in my room, especially when I'm teaching third graders. So I'm totally with you. We're in that same age range that we're looking at, and I'm concerned about those books as well. I was disappointed that it looks like Young Justice is going to be canceled, the comic I'm talking about, that ties in. I wish they had considered keeping that going and maybe continuing the continuity of the animated universe to see if it had a readership that was fans of that show that would develop from it, and let that readership kind of see if it would go on, or try a digital version of it. And, you know, maybe collect it then in trade format afterwards. I don't know. It's baffling to me. The one thing I will say is I'm assuming if they follow suit with the pattern that they always have, there's new animated series replacing it. There's that Batman one that's coming up, Beware of the Batman, I believe it's called. And then there's the Teen Titans Go one that's coming. So I'm assuming those are going to have comic book tie-ins associated with them, I hope. Because I, like you, look to them as being great lead-ins, not even just to get the kids jumping on. It's great reading material for my students. By themselves in isolation, whether they launch on to being great comic fans from them or not. There's a lot of my kids in there that I know, they're really enjoying reading them in my classroom. If they become comic fans afterwards and pursue that as a hobby, and that's something that's interesting, great. My thing is they're enjoying it right now, and that's really the right here and right now. Getting them reading and having them enjoy the reading experience is really what I'm trying to do with those books, and they do. They're passed around to boys and girls. They all seem to really enjoy it. They will draw their own characters afterwards, which I think is terrific because that means they're thinking beyond the reading. These are stories that matter to them. And it's great in a day and age when we've got books like Diary of a Wimpy Kid and stuff like that that are becoming very popular that are comic book related stories. Kids like that visual medium. And there's a lot of depth to the stories that are being put out by DC's All Ages universe. It's kind of sad that these are being canceled and they're not leaving All Ages placeholders in there. You know what I mean? To keep that line going. And I'm convinced that there's going to be books that are going to replace them with the new animated series. But I wish that transition would be smoother than it looks like. I don't know. It's that's kind of where my head's at right now, and I would love to just see a continuation. I don't know why those books have to be canceled. You know, I don't know if the sales numbers. I don't pay attention to the all ages sales numbers, so I've got to admit my ignorance there. So I want to say that, and if anybody knows sales numbers or things, can speak to that as far as how that works. I would love you to call in and share some of that when it comes to the all ages material. I know it's not as much as their regular title lines, so I would love to see, and I would love to see what trades do for them in the All Ages universe, because I buy the trades for my classroom. They last longer. That's really the reason why I grab the trades for my students. Single issues would last at best a couple of days with how much they're passed around, because they're put in desks, and when the kids are pulling them and passing them around. I like seeing the books get beat up because it means they're being read, but I want them to last a certain amount of time so the kids can actually get some value from reading them. So, well, jumping back, Scott, to your comments about the story Death of the Family and your length of time reading. It's you and I'm 42, so you and I obviously have a very similar path in our love for comics and how long we've been reading comics. And one of the things that I really loved about this story, it's the same as what you're saying. This is a story where I was on edge. It was on pins and needles. R.I.P. had that for me. I remember reading things like Killing Joke. Killing Joke was a page-turner. You were kind of gripped to that. Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's work when they were doing those big, long, 12-month story arcs, those stories felt like they had impact, and they were page-turners to see where the mystery was going to be solved. This one did have the unique nature that I think Jason Todd's death had, where when you're reading that story, death in the family, you knew that there was a really strong option that Robin was going to die. There was a voting going on. So I remember the cliffhanger of that issue being on pins and needles myself, wondering what was going to happen to this kid. And it was funny, I would have voted one way with Jason Todd early on. I honestly would have voted for him to die early on because I wasn't very into the character because, I shouldn't say I wasn't into the character, I loved reading Batman, but he was very snotty. But then you read books like The Cult, where all of a sudden he steps up and you saw growth of the character, kind of like what happened with Damian. I think Jason Todd's path, it's funny how I never really related him to Damian as much as lately. For some reason, my journey with him kind of changed the same way with the book The Cult. With The Cult, I all of a sudden understood Jason Todd, and I really started to like him. So I voted to save him. And Jim Starlin, I ran into him at a convention, one of the signings. It wasn't like, we were hanging out chatting, but he was very pleasant to talk to along the way. It's a great example of why you should talk to creators when you're getting something signed. And he had shared that the voting was super close. It really could have gone either way. It was that close between living or dying for the character. So the character had generated an equal amount of fan love and an equal amount of fans who wanted to see him, which I think is interesting. I think that makes a character fun to read when you have that kind of balance between the two of them. So it was interesting that story went that route. But I agree with you that this story, I was very worried about what was going to happen with Alfred, like you. I don't know if I could have, if that had happened to Alfred, I don't know how I would have felt about it. I won't say that I would have stopped reading Batman comics, but that would have left an interesting taste in my mouth. And it's hard because, like, the death of Jason, when that happened, what happened to Barbara Gordon, at the time, when Killing Joke with Batgirl, that was a huge blow. And I was like, wow, they really did that to Batgirl? I don't know how I feel about that. It would have been that kind of level. The story went to uncomfortable places like that in Death of the Family. And that was something that I really enjoyed with what Scott Snyder and the whole creative team were doing. They were taking us to places where we were in our own heads crafting what we thought might happen, teasing it, not giving us those. And I'm a fan of that. A lot of times the gore in the story were things that you were putting in your head, not the writer and the artist. And those kind of hidden gems, I reference Hitchcock because I'm a big fan of his films a lot. I think that's more powerful than showing some of those things sometimes. Not knowing what was underneath those trays was more interesting than knowing. And I thought that was cool, the way that was handled. It was, and that counts outside of the books where we got to see some of that revealed. So, I don't know, very interesting story, and I agree with you. This is one that's, I'm glad, I know I'm going to be giving this book as a gift to friends of mine come next holiday season, because I tend to throw a comic book that I felt from the year was really important. This one will definitely be a stocking stuffer for friends of mine next year, because they're casual readers, and this is something that I think they will really enjoy for a lot of what you said.
How's it going, guys? This is Brandon calling in New Orleans. I know you guys are going to be talking green this week, and I heard your guest is going to be Myron, so I thought I'd call in and give a shout-out to Myron over there. I'm a huge fan of actually both of you guys' podcasts. As you know, I call all the time here. Myron, I listen to you guys' show all the time. I love it. I never called in, but I've definitely been listening for about a year and a half now. It's a great show. I had a couple of comments to make. I've been listening to the last, catching up on your last two podcasts, Myron, and I feel your frustration. You're usually a pretty positive guy, just like Jim and all over there. But I definitely felt some frustration with a couple of the issues in Green Lantern recently. I try and stay on the positive side too, but there was definitely some gloom for a little while. But man, I got to say they definitely caught back up with this. With issues number 16 that just came out recently, I definitely I dug all of the issues consistently. Finally, again, I was somewhat satisfied again, happy. I gotta say though, I'm a new fan to Green Lantern. Batman's my guy. They can tell you that. They know I comment a lot about him, but I've been on Green Lantern for a good little while now, but I definitely didn't jump in at Blackest Night. I jumped in a little bit before, the New 52 at Flashpoint. So all about White Lanterns and things like that, I'm not too familiar with. So, the stuff in New Guardians, I'm loving. I love how it transpired with Kyle going through the emotions of the all the emotions to learn the different powers and come to grips with what they mean, and especially how he had such a hard time getting love, that being his hardest one with his past heartaches. I did follow Green Lantern in the early 90s when I was like 15, and Kyle was jumping in after the death of Superman when he was a solo guy. So I do say I have a little bit more attachment to Kyle. Most of the time I love Hal now. He's pretty much the guy I follow right now, but Kyle, I have a sentimental value from when I was 15 and kind of followed him sporadically, being the torchbearer and all, and I've seen they changed that a little bit recently. I'm a little confused with it. I know in the first issue it looked like he was still the torchbearer and the only Lantern, and now it looks like was training with all the other Lanterns. That's something that kind of confused me as of recently as well. But I'm sure they'll sort all of that out down the road with the line, as they've been doing over 15, 16 issues now, of course. But anyway, to get back to the discussion with it, so after he discovers, after he masters all of his emotions, he becomes the White Lantern. I'm guessing that's life. I've gotten that much, and black being death. What does being a White Lantern or a Black Lantern entail? I guess that would be my main question for this one, because I don't know too much about it. I just know what it represents, life and death. What came about it in Blackest Night? If you can give me a little rundown, I would really appreciate that, because I guess I should go back and read up on it and do a little bit more research. I've been meaning to, but there's so much material out there that I read right now. It's hard to go back and catch up sometimes. So I really should. But if you can fill me in on it, or at least what you think it means now for Kyle to be a White Lantern, and going forward, is this going to be something that you think he holds on to, the ability to keep all of these emotions and become a White Lantern at will? Will he be Kyle Rayner White Lantern, you think, or is he still going to be Kyle Rayner Green Lantern, renegade on the run? That's my big one. Other than that, I gotta say I love the other books as well. I'm not really a Guy fan, but they've kind of had me loving Guy recently. The jerk getting his ring taken away and getting sent back to Earth because, he's classic Guy Gardner. And thinking he can be Batman. I love these Green Lanterns and always picking on Batman. It's funny because they will never, even with a ring, I don't think a Green Lantern could take Batman. After you get to know Batman, they all know. Hal knows it. He knows he couldn't take Batman now, I think. But in the beginning, even he picked on him. But it's just a funny thing, he made the comment, well, if Batman can be a crime fighter, I'm sure I can do this without my ring. But he's become likable, especially with the family. It's a little tossed in as of lately, but it adds to his character, and I do like it. I didn't like Guy before, liking him now. So, all the books have been pretty good, and Simon Baz is definitely a great addition to the Green Lantern mythos. I didn't think I would like him before. I was kind of skeptical when they were doing the whole release of Simon Baz, and I didn't like the costume either at first. I got to say that when, we've talked about costumes and redos for the, New 52, and when I saw his costume, I know he's a new Green Lantern, but I just didn't like it. I don't know. There was something about it in the beginning, and now it's kind of grown on me. Now I'd rather him with the mask and everything. I don't think I'd want to see him with the mask off most of the time while he's in, Green Lantern mode. So it's a cool thing. And even the gun, I was skeptical on the gun, and I don't know why, because it's Geoff Johns, and I know the guy's spectacular. He does great work, so I guess I shouldn't have doubted him, but I did, and I guess I'm glad I did, because I get to be pleasantly surprised in the way I'm liking Simon Baz now. So consistently, the books are doing better. I'm I'm not going to talk about Red Lantern because, like I said, I'm trying not to talk about things that are disappointing and or pick on them. So I'm not going to go that route. I've been buying all of the books lately, keeping up since the relaunch of the 52, and Marvel has got this thing now. I know this is DCM podcast, but Sean, I know you've just talked recently on your other podcast about all new X-Men and Superior Spider-Man. Marvel's doing some great stuff, so I might have to make a couple of cuts, even though I'm going with DCB. The pocketbook's getting a little tight now, so I might have to drop one, and that's looking like it's going to be it. Although I got to say, it has been better. It's not great, but it's been better, so that's good. It looks like it's going in a good direction. I'm sad if I do have to cut it because it looks like it's going somewhere better. I'll leave it at that one. So anyway, guys. Hope you guys have a good show. Myron, love the show. Jim, Sean, great show. Keep it up. I'll talk to you guys later.
It's always interesting to me because I'm like you. I'm a Batman guy, and that was the guy. But it's funny when I think a lot of times when I say that, I don't want to give the impression that that's always been like my limited focus. That tends to be my favorite character, but I love the richness of the universe and the differences when you get to different characters like the Green Lantern books as well. It's when you talked about the White Lantern before, I want to be careful in this because let people read what happened. But in the story Blackest Night, in order to defeat the Black Lanterns, all of a sudden the White Lanterns rose up, and this was a connection was severed, and then Superman, Wonder Woman, Superboy, The Flash, Green Arrow, Animal Man, Donna Troy, Kid Flash, Superman, Ice, they transformed into White Lanterns, and they all attacked Black Hand. The white light from the White Lanterns raised a bunch of previously deceased heroes and villains and brought them back. And this led to a journey for Deadman, who became the possessor of the White Lantern ring that is chronicled in Brightest Day. So I want to be careful on that. The use of it in this case, where we see Kyle coming from every avenue of the emotional spectrum, back in the day when the White Lanterns were introduced, which wasn't that long ago, but when it was introduced, there were still questions about it and still things that we had to learn about it. Nowadays, we're getting some of those questions answered in Kyle's journey on what it looks like in the New 52, but that leads to more of them. Will Kyle remain the White Lantern? I don't know. I'm intrigued by that. That's something that's interesting. To me, what's working in the Green Lantern books is every issue, when you look back to them, whether they're your favorite issues or not as you go along, what ends up happening is you hit a certain issue where you realize everything that you read before had an impact. It was a journey that you went on, and you reach a point where you're like, oh, that's where they were going with this. And that's how that ties into this. And there's stuff going on with Guy Gardner that ties into what's going on with Kyle Rayner. And that ties into what's going on with Hal Jordan and Sinestro. And we see how these things, and John Stewart and his journey with what went on with Mogo, and him trying to, again, him having to take the life of another Lantern, and those things all paid off in some way. These were all setups that were playing into this larger story arc. And now we're seeing why those things were done and where they were going and how they were all in their own way interconnected. That's the thing that I really love about the Green Lantern books, and things that are going on with Atrocitus and the Red Lanterns now, as you're mentioning how it's kind of building up. I think what's happening now is we're seeing, okay, how does this connect? And that's where it's having more of an impact and more of a feel. So I like that journey that we go on with the Green Lantern books, and part of that is faith in the payoff. And that's something where you were saying I should have had faith. I don't know that you need to have had faith along the way. It's that when the payoff's delivered, you kind of go, okay, this is why I keep reading these books. Because all of a sudden, at some point in time, the creators will smack me in the head and make me go, okay, this is the point. This is why Baz is here. This is why I care about this guy. The discomfort along the way, kind of, do I like this guy or not? That's part of the journey. And I think that's a real journey. When you're meeting a new person and getting introduced to that new character, that adds a reality to the experience. And to me, that's interesting and cool. So that journey is part of it. As far as what books you should drop and which ones you shouldn't, I'm with you. I'm enjoying a lot of the Marvel Now material that's coming out. And you referenced 2 books, The Superior Spider-Man and All New X-Men, that I'm really greatly enjoying. So I run. It's funny. It's a time thing for me. Which books should I read and things like that. There's a focus on the DC books because I genuinely enjoy them, but also because of the podcast. So there's that avenue on that end. So anything outside of DC that I read, it's more of a time. How much time do I have to read those things? And that's where I end up making those decisions. My suggestion would be, as far as any of the Green Lantern books, with the announcements, as I mentioned at the beginning of this voicemail segment, of the new creative teams coming on those titles, you might want to wait till the creative teams shift and see if you like the books then. See if maybe the new creative teams are getting you hooked in and you're excited for them. Then that might make an easy decision for you where you're like, I'm liking all of these, I cut something else. Or there's one of these books that's no longer grabbing me the way they did before, and I'll switch. So I would wait till the new creative teams. That would be my suggestion because they're coming up so soon. That might help make that decision for you one way or another, where you decide, do I keep these? Do I go to something else? That seems like a natural transition point that would help you make that decision as far as, the whole line, especially with the new Larfleeze book coming on board as well. Which books you're going to want to read. That's cool. So anyway, thanks for your call, as always.
Look at those strange little beetles. They look... Great neutron!
Starting off our comic book chat about Green Lantern, we're going to start with Green Lantern number 16, Trial by Fire. This is one of the Rise of the Third Army issues. Geoff Johns is the writer, Doug Mahnke on pencils, Christian Alme, Keith Champagne, Tom Wen, Mark Irwin, and Mahnke on inks, Tony Avina with Alex Sinclair on colors, Steve Wan's letterer, Mahnke and Sinclair on the cover, Will Moss, associate editor, Matt Idelson, editor. And apologies for any name butchery. This is... I got to be cautious on this one. I'm going to say it's a Baz-focused issue, but it also puts forward a lot of our mystery about what's been going on with Hal and Sinestro. I've really loved the balance of the pacing in what's been going on in this main Green Lantern title with Baz, but not ignoring the two characters that we were we were following for so long, the journey of Hal and Sinestro, and it's been a great energy in this title for me. When Baz first came on board, I knew I was going to be interested in a new Green Lantern. I didn't realize that I don't know if you guys are feeling the same way about him, that I would grow to love this guy so fast. I'm really digging and enjoying this character to the point where I'm glad he's continuing on beyond this, because I want to follow his story more. And that doesn't take anything away from my favorite Lanterns. It's now a new flavor that's been introduced into the mythology that is relevant to me. But how do you guys feel about Baz? We're like 16 issues into this series so far. We've had some development of Baz at this point. Are you finding a larger attachment to the character? Are you not? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just kind of curious. Myron, let's go ahead and go with you. Where are you with Baz?
I really like Baz. In the beginning, I was a little, not sure where it was going to go with the story, but as things have gone on, I've really come to like the character. I think it's kind of neat because, I've been reading Green Lantern for so long that you kind of lose that sense of awe sometimes. And so you get to kind of relive that discovery through Baz. And in this particular issue, you kind of see his eyes open up as he suddenly realizes his universe has gotten a lot bigger than what he thought it was. And I think that's just kind of neat because it puts you back in that place that I was when I was a kid and I was reading these issues for the first time back in the old days, and it was all new to me. Here it's all new to him, so I kind of enjoying it through proxy a little bit. But his story is very personal, and I think what drives him to do the things he does is very timely, and I think a lot of people can relate to him.
Jim?
Yeah, I'm digging Baz. I'm really digging him. And as the character is going on, as we're getting more story with him and just seeing him interact with the different Lanterns, I'm starting to notice qualities that are both Hal and Sinestro. And it kind of, to me, it makes sense why the Ring chose him. This wasn't just your traditional, you have the ability to overcome great fear. No, this Ring sought out somebody who would please both Hal and Sinestro at the same time. And I think it's that mix of he's got a little bit of a rebel in him, but there is a strong sense of loyalty. There is a strong sense of family, and there is just this personal honor within him. But he doesn't, he's not exactly clean cut, by the book type person. There is going to be a little bit of butting heads against the power, butting heads against the authority. And that's some stuff that you see in both Hal and Sinestro, but they both have that sense of honor. They both have that sense of, I got to do what's right. And you see that in him. And it's something that's gradually come out and gradually let us see that side of him. And that's something that I'm glad he's not going away. I'm glad this is one of the characters that I'm glad we're still going to keep getting stories from him. And I want to see him and the squirrel, hanging out. I like that dynamic. I like seeing this talking squirrel who's really is a butt-kicking Green Lantern.
It's nuts.
One of the things that I liked about Baz very early on, almost right from the get-go, sometimes when they introduce a new character into that role, your first question is why? Why are they doing this? What's the point? And very early on, this character, first thing is he didn't feel generic. He felt very fresh, very different. It was a new direction from the way that he got his ring, which I love the constant struggle between Hal and Sinestro in the ring, with the two opposing messages coming from their personalities, kind of fighting for dominance. And I like that Baz does not have the skill set to recognize there's a way to separate those two messages. But I liked how that combat was something we as the readers knew was very natural to those two characters. But Baz and his whole story and his whole journey and just the little, Myron was mentioning the learning curve and kind of going through that journey with him. What really worked for me is we've seen this happen with Lanterns before as longtime readers. When you see, I saw Guy Gardner go through this back in the day. I saw Kyle go through this back in the day. I saw Hal go through this back in the day, through reprints and reruns, and also through, when they, re-released that issue so many times. They've retold the origin story of Hal and stuff too. So you got to go on that journey, and so many great writers have touched on that. You've seen John Stewart go through this journey. I love that seeing him go through this journey felt very, very fresh. I'm enjoying for Marvel Ultimate Spider-Man right now. We're seeing a new Spider-Man slowly kind of go through the whole becoming Spider-Man thing. I'm digging that. I'm enjoying going on the ride with him because it makes me feel like I'm becoming Spider-Man with him. Baz makes me feel like I'm becoming a Green Lantern with him, which I felt like with Kyle. When Kyle got the ring, I kind of felt like that. I was going on that ride as well. When they did retellings of Hal's origins, I love Hal. I'm a Hal junkie. Anytime they've done a retelling of Hal's origin on some level, I've felt like, I'm becoming Green Lantern too, and you're cheering for that. But for Baz to do that so early on, where I felt like I was riding along with him, that was, and in a way, I think because it was so unique to Baz's experience, that it felt fresh to me and I was glued to it. I want to say again, it doesn't feel generic or cookie cutter. It was, there's a relevance to Baz and to his story that sets him apart from the other Lanterns, that makes you want to see him meet them, wants to see what those, and when we've seen that happen, it's, especially with Guy, we wanted to see him meet Guy and see how these two, on the surface, it'd be like, wow, they're going to be very similar, but then also seeing how they're not. That was really well done and shows how far these characters have come in being developed as three-dimensional characters. I really love how they're handling this.
And visually, I'm really digging his costume. Mm-hmm. I like the look. I like what's going on with him. The only thing I do question is the pistol, but I like the fact that they've given a reason why he has it, and even him and Guy, their conversation about why he carries the pistol. He's like, you don't need that. You got the most powerful weapon in the universe right there on your hand. And I just loved seeing that go back and forth between the two of them, and just, the understanding and why he carries it. Eventually, I'd like to see the day where he leaves the pistol behind and he completely trusts in the ring, and he knows exactly what it is to be a ring slinger, what it is to be a Green Lantern, and just see his comfort with it go beyond the point where he feels he needs to carry it. But it's, again, it's something that when I first saw the initial images, I'm like, why would he have the pistol? I don't know about this, but again, they explained it out. It's part of him, and it's kind of something I enjoy seeing, that the fact that they're not completely just throwing him in, and he completely trusts in everything, and he's, oh, I know, this is, this crazy notion of willpower creating things. He's not completely accepting it. He's not completely embracing it. He's using it. He's getting a feel for it, and he's starting to understand it, but he's not just blindly following it, and I like that.
Tell me the Agent Fed thing isn't super cool. Like, I really enjoyed how that relationship developed, how Fed was looking at, like, it's great to see somebody in that role not being the enemy that's constantly hunting this guy, that actually saw the clues and said, this doesn't make sense. I really like that, because Baz's story, when you look at it on the surface, it looks like Baz is a bad dude. But Fed was looking at this going, okay, there's like certain parts of Baz's story that add up, but then there's a point where it veers off and there's a fork in the road, and it's not leading to the conclusion that we're reaching. And I like that Fed, like, it's not all of a sudden that Baz has been cleared, that, like, there's evidence that's missing now, and Fed knows it, and he has this moment with Baz where the two of them are clearly, there is this moment of, like, it's almost like you see him, doing a fist bump. Yeah. They've kind of reached that point, but that kind of hardship isn't done for Baz yet. And that was something that I really liked, that it isn't all of a sudden a clean slate for this guy. It's because it shouldn't feel that way instantly. It's not their magic wand for Baz. But the contact with Waller, I'm like, oh, this is how he's going to get tied into where things are going with Justice League of America and stuff. It's this Fed's opening up these doorways for this guy to be a part of something. But also you can see where maybe the other league won't be so happy about it. I don't know. I liked that whole, like, organic kind of setup with it. There was something about it that felt very natural and real. Because sometimes those things end too quickly. And it's like, all's forgiven, you're cool now because you're a hero and you've got this suit on. It didn't go that way for Baz. Or hasn't gone that way yet for Baz. And I want to see that journey play out over time.
Well, just round 2 of him versus the Justice League. I kind of want to see that one. Because that was a great moments where he was dealing with them, and they're initially kind of approaching it, going, "Oh, okay, what's happening here?" And eventually how he outthinks and outdoes the Justice League, and that for me was again a really cool Baz moment. And I want to see the next time he meets up with him. I want to see, okay, what's going to happen next? Where, he's in the Justice League. Where is that going to go? And just, there's so much they're laying this groundwork for this character that I'm like, this is cool. I want to see where he goes. I want to see what's next for Baz.
I liked the whole interaction with, is it Bidig? Is that how it's pronounced? Because I'm terrible when they don't put vowels with trying to figure out the pronunciation of it. But
I've always said Bidig, and then during the Robot Chicken special, they called him Badge, so I've kind of taken the Badge thing, since I figured Geoff Johns was the creative consultant. That must be the way it's supposed to be, but I still end up saying Bidig sometimes.
Yeah, and we're in both cases, vowels are being put in there that just aren't there.
See, I do the squirrel. That's what I go with.
I like that when the squirrel and chipmunk reference are thrown out, though, that he immediately stops him and says, goes to his race and says, this is really where I'm from, human. But it's a very human response. We generalize and we make assumptions, and that's a very human thing to do. It's a human weakness. We do it with our own people. But I like that he calls us on it, and I'm like, I love when alien races kind of address real human issues, real human faults. These are things we as a society do this. We generalize and we make assumptions because we see something that this is, not realizing that, no, this is the lead culture on this guy's planet. They aren't like, these, rodents, like we're used to them being. He's actually like every bit as relevant. He's, somebody of great importance to his people because he's their representative to the Green Lantern Corps. But there are other people on that planet have jobs and live life the way that we do, and they're just as varied and diverse as our culture. But if you were to ask anybody right now having that conversation with him, they don't see that. They see this one Green Lantern here and see him as this isolated anomaly. Not recognizes, no, there's a whole culture of his people out there. I love this part of the Green Lantern universe. It's something that I think since Rebirth, straight on through for the various series like Rebels and stuff like that have kind of intersected with this whole universe, we've gotten to see an expanse of DC's galaxy and really seen how small Earth is compared to the sheer rich amount of races that are a part of the cosmic universe. Going forward, I am so interested in seeing more of this in DC. You know, in these titles, but also in other books where it makes sense for these characters to pop up, because I think this is something rich and unique to the DC world. And when you've got characters like him going around, I'd love to see like a short spotlight of him. I'd read a whole issue about him. But I like this kind of stuff in the Green Lantern Corps books in particular, because I've found that there's so many alien races where their Green Lantern that's been featured in the Green Lantern Corps book, for example, are becoming some of my favorite Lantern characters to read. And when they're not spotlighted in those titles, I miss them. I want to know more, like, what are they up to? Like, what's this guy doing now? And like the Rannian and the Thanagarian, you know, who they've been spotlighting, you know, in those books, they've been spotlighted before. When they aren't featured and they haven't been around for a while, I want to see more of them. Like, what are they up to? You know, we had Sornik, who was Kyle's girlfriend. She hasn't been featured as much. She made a cameo, like a quick appearance in one of the more recent issues that we're going to be talking about. And when she popped up, I was like, yes! And I think that's something that creatively, we talk about what has been the strength of all of these writers that have been working with these characters, is choosing the right lanterns to bring into a storyline, hitting their tone and their voice just right, having them add something that makes this book feel different than when you read The Flash, when you read Aquaman, Batman, Animal Man, Superman, something that like sets a Green Lantern book apart and makes it feel fresh. That's something when there's a lot of books on the comic shelf and people are trying to choose between certain titles that they're going to pick up. You've got to take creative characters like this and not just have them in the background. They've got to be in the front. They've got to be adding something to the story. This is the guy that's teaching Baz how to use his ring. Baz doesn't know how to charge it yet. And you bring this guy down, and he's quickly earning respect. These two are becoming running buddies. I did not expect that when we first saw him. I figured he was going to, teach him a few little tidbits. I didn't see them becoming running buddies. I want to see this relationship continue, because I love these two together. I think this is a great partnership.
Well, yeah, I think... Oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, go on.
I was going to say that, Badge would be an easy partner for him because he works for Peanuts.
Ba-dum-bum. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I was going to say the scene in the cemetery where Badge is like, oh, look, a local, and asks him where the location of the lantern is. And Baz is like, on this planet, squirrels don't talk. He goes, really? Then what did he just say? Perhaps your ears are too small, or your brain is not developed enough. I love that little bit that Badge just talked to a squirrel. And he could hear him and he could understand them. And it was another nice little knock on humanity. And I want to see the scenes where they show Baz trying to talk to the squirrel. Just trying to figure out, hey, is there any other animal I can talk to? What about this? And, and I want to see him trying, because I know if that had been me, the very next free time I had, I would be trying to talk to various animals using the ring to communicate, like with cats or dogs or whatnot.
How do you know Badge didn't just pull a fast one on him?
He may have.
No, I'm seriously, because he could have just said, like,
completely hooked into it, and they'd be laughing at me at the core, going, "Yeah, you see what the stupid human's doing? He's trying to talk to animals."
Because at this point in time, he's probably had enough. Like he's sitting here, okay, they've called me a chipmunk, they've called me a squirrel, all this kind of stuff. At this point, if it were me in that position, there is no way, if that squirrel didn't respond to me, there's no way I would tell him that didn't happen.
Yeah.
It was more, he got the dig in saying your brain's too small. It doesn't matter at that point. You could read that either way, as either like Badge really did talk to him or he didn't. That's funny how I'm developing Badge now as his name because of that special. But I've been calling him Badig like every time in my head that I've been reading this, but now all of a sudden he's Badge. It doesn't matter to me. I love that on this, it can be read both ways. It makes perfect sense that he either really did talk to him or that he's pulling a fast one on him. And I love the irony of the whole thing is that we'll never know.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing there to indicate whether he actually did or if he just came across the lantern by accident or whatever, or using his skills. Because he's a very skilled lantern. My respect level for this character very, very quickly, not that I haven't had a respect level for him in previous appearances, but I think it's important when you bring any other lantern into like this book, Hal's book, and especially when you got a character like Baz, and you're going to sit there and say, okay, this character is a chipmunk or a squirrel or whatever you want to call him. That's his whole race. To sit there and take that and make this character feel like this is Yoda in this book, like he knows what he's doing, he's an expert, this is a veteran lantern, you do not mess with him. That was established very quickly in this issue. Yet it was still fun. There was chuckle moments. It didn't take itself too seriously, but my respect for this character never dropped all the way through. That's an incredible balance of storytelling. When you can keep it fun, you can keep it light, yet at the same time, if there's any business that's coming down to attack them, this is the guy I want standing next to me because he's going to kick some serious butt because he knows what he's doing. That's a great sense of storytelling. I loved that part of this.
Well, it goes back to what you were talking about, too, Sean, about how these characters are also interesting. I think the Green Lantern mythology could easily support another book that was an anthology book where all these characters get moments to shine.
I liked when he talked to him about the need for faith in himself and the ring, because it's not just about faith in the ring. You have to have faith in yourself. And I'll be curious to see if Baz eventually drops the gun, and what it will take for him to do that, like what evolution it will take for him. So I'm glad he has it right now because I think it's an interesting story tool to show how he's different in confidence than the other lanterns, in himself and in what the ring means and what it does. And he's actually got reason with the fact that not knowing about the ring has left him vulnerable when the ring ran out. So he doesn't trust that the ring's always going to be there for him. And arguably, there's been times when Hal, John, Guy, Kyle, and actually many of the other Lanterns have been in positions where they haven't had the power of the rings because of different villains, and even the Guardians have taken that from them. So there's a certain argument you can make that say that, well, maybe Baz is right in what he's doing. But I do see him eventually finding a way to drop the gun. I would love to see what it takes, and I want to go on that journey with him. I don't want that to be next issue. I want that to be something gradually that happens over time as we see the evolution of Baz. He's a character that I want to get to know.
Oh, definitely. It's funny as you're going, I'm nodding, going, yes. This is, and it's some of the cool moments in this issue for me were the non-Green Lantern moments. I think that's the strength of any well-crafted story where you're looking at the character outside of the costume. When you're looking at his family life, his supporting cast, this whole exploration of his sister and his brother-in-law, how he got hurt because of Baz and how he wants to help her, and he's always tried to be the supportive, tried to help her out, but some of his actions have caused her even more problems. And now he's got this power, this ring that can do anything. He's like, well, let's push it. I'm going to. And his first big thing as a Green Lantern, isn't for himself. It's for his brother. And I thought that was just a great moment of a great character-defining moment.
When they're showing the messages between Hal and Sinestro, I liked the distinction between the two. I really liked Hal's focus on filling Baz in with the story. Obviously not knowing who Baz is, but knowing that the ring is going to seek out somebody new. But trying to give him the information he needs to steer clear of their fate. recognizing you're a rookie, you need to be able to, have some faith in the ring and all that, but then leaving the message for his love. I am a sucker for that stuff. We talked about with the animated series earlier, how we loved the relationship between Razor and Aya, and how that was something that was really, you wanted to see the two of them get together and all that. I've loved how I want to see Hal and Carol get together. I want to see that who knows with where the storyline's going to go, if that happens or not. Whether it does or it doesn't, if you're going to pull at the heartstrings of your readership, you build a relationship where Hal was ready to let, it's okay, I'm done with my ring. I'm ready to try to live a normal life. I'm going to live that with Carol. He got pulled back into this. He had made the decision that he could live a normal life. He wanted to try and do that. This moment, it's bittersweet when he wants to give that message to her, because it just shows just how far he's evolved with his feelings about that relationship. And no matter where it goes now, I really like that they gave us an opportunity to experience that in this run with Sinestro taking over the ring, because it was just like a different side of Hal. I like the sense of feeling like Hal's maturity there, that he's been through so much that he's ready to take this step with her. And I don't know, there's something, I don't know if it's something as Jim, as a newer reader, I don't know if you felt like an affinity for their, because I know you before said you didn't quite feel the relationship between Hal and Carol. Is it something you feel more now, or are you still kind of distant from it?
Oh, no, I'm definitely all in on the Carol thing now. When we first started really reading this, I didn't have any connection to them. I'm like, oh, okay. Because I remember thinking, I was hoping he'd get, he and Cowgirl would be more of something like, I think those two would be kind of neat. Carol's the past. Let's go with this route. But now I have the same, reverence those two together as I do Lois and Clark. It's that same, like, these two make sense to me. They should be together. This is, Barry and Iris. This is that kind of level of relationship that as I've seen them go through their highs and lows, I've seen them kind of come together and have that moment where, hey, this could be something. We could finally say, oh, no, they're kind of pulled apart. Wait. And, so I've gone on those roller coasters with them, and I'm rooting for them to come back. And when Hal comes back, I'm rooting on him to pull out the ring and propose and have a whole wedding, a lantern wedding and whatnot. I want to see that. I really want to see these two together. And even she stays as a Star Sapphire. I think that'd be kind of neat, the two different cores.
Myron, as a longtime Lantern fan, any, not just hopes for Hal and Carol, because we'll get into that personal level of that, but any kind of predictions on where you feel that's going to go?
Well, it's interesting because they've kind of been down this road a few times before. This isn't their first trip to the rodeo, though all that is pre-Flashpoint. So, whether the history's there or not, I don't know. But it's almost like their relationship is one of those things where they are happier apart, wanting each other than they are when they're together. At least that's been the history. I would love to see them given a chance to perhaps get together, get married, and explore things together with her retaining her Star Sapphire ability and him as a Green Lantern. I think that would be a very interesting dynamic. I could certainly see the two of them leaving Earth if you even wanted to go that far. I just think it's time for them to take a chance with these two characters like they did with Clark and Lois. I certainly co-sign what Jim says. I think it's time for them to do that. And I think what they've shown, what Geoff Johns has built up, is we've seen this evolution of Hal from how we all perceived Hal before to a very more well-rounded individual. Yeah, he's still driven by machismo and he's still very cocksure, but he's also a different person than he was back then. And I think it's nice to see this particularly heartfelt message. I hope we get to see Carol witness it as like we get to witness it, because I think that would mean a lot to her as a character. And ultimately, yeah, I'd love to see them get together.
It's funny, when we're talking about that, I loved when Hal's message, the one distinct difference is, Hal is like giving Baz information to try and find them, and hopefully you can use this to come and find us. But he does put in that caveat, if I'm dead. And that's what leads to his message for Carol. Wants to make sure that, his dying message is to, make sure that Carol really knows how he felt, So that way there's no gray area for her. That's something that was important to him. Whereas when you take a look at Sinestro's message, it's not an if. It's find Arkillo. He will find me. We will take care of this. There is no if I'm dead or anything like that. It's a very different ball game with Sinestro's, which I thought was great because there was a real capturing of their personality. But when we go back to the relationship of Hal and Carol, one of the things I really like about... I know it's taboo in comics nowadays. I don't know why. It happened with Spider-Man. It happened with Superman, where these characters somehow can't be married because it's uninteresting. I disagree. I think... I don't want to see every character married off. Don't get me that. But I think, to me, it's interesting to have some that are married because that's what makes them that relationship unique. How would Hal and Carol deal with her being a Star Sapphire and him being a relay, if they go that route, and being married? Because that's going to put them in positions at times where maybe their missions, their sense of purpose is at odds. And how do they as a couple deal with that? I think the Green Lantern books would be a great opportunity to do that because of the fact that you've got so many Earth Lanterns. You don't have to marry them all off. You have Hal and Carol do it. And does it have to last forever? Well, no, not necessarily. As we've seen, as Myron's mentioning it hasn't. But I think that would be a unique place to go with Hal and Carol, to have them get married and to see that thing that we haven't seen yet from the two of them. What is it like to try and deal with that? And you still got the Bachelors in Guy Gardner, in Jon Stewart, in Kyle, in Baz. And we can see where, those characters go in, the Bachelor relationships, where you can kind of play around with that thing that there seems to be this thing that you need that in order to keep characters relevant and interesting. You can't marry them all off. Well, I think you can do that in this book in this book universe, because you've got so many of them that there is that opportunity to take the one of them and say, you know what? If there's two people in the whole Green Lantern universe that really should be given a shot to go at it, it's these two. And yet you can still keep that thing that seems to be perceived as needed. Because I'm going to use that because I really don't think it makes a character uninteresting. Because, Myron, you mentioned Clark and Lois. I thought when they were married, the right writers did a terrific job with it and made it something different than you saw in other titles, because the two of them were, and they had to deal with that side of their relationship. So I'd love to see Hal and Carol finally get a chance to do that. I think as readers, we'd be given something unique that we haven't seen before. This book of Black, the one that belongs to the Black Hand... Tell me there wouldn't be a creep factor in even touching that. We've seen that book open up and suck people in. And I don't know that I'm carrying that thing in any kind of satchel, or touching it or doing anything with that book, because it just oozes creepiness. But I loved when Badge or Badig, is like kind of touching it and saying, we can use this possibly to be led to them. I know, it's one of those things where I tend to try to ignore solicits, which is why I didn't necessarily know the ending issues were coming with those writers, because I tend to try and avoid this. But I did see in an upcoming solicit that it looks like we're getting Hal back, but they're saying it's a surprising return, so that always makes you wonder, what does that mean in the Green Lantern universe? What is a surprising return, and what's Hal going to be like when he comes back? But anytime you're like that's a big shock for any of us. I think we all assumed they're all coming back anyway.
Yeah.
But when you look at that particular book, how do you come out of that book unscathed?
Well, you can't. There's no way you can be, just especially with what he's dealing with and what they're seeing. They've been going through in the land of the dead or in the other side or wherever they exactly are. You can't have that experience and not have it affect you. Now, the definition of who the Lanterns are, they're able to overcome that fear. They're able to, go beyond and, embrace the light. And I think that's Hal's greatest strength, that he's not going to be unaffected by it, but it's not going to be a driving force in his life. He's going to use this as a point and as a strength. And Sinestro will never admit that it affected him or that it was, something. He'll play it off as if, it was nothing. I was temporarily inconvenienced by this, but I'm Sinestro. I power through it, no problem. But I think even he will be affected by it, and those are the subtleties of a story that I'm looking forward to seeing. I want to see if it becomes a subject and a broached, if that actually is brought up, if the psychology behind being in there, comes to play.
Now, do you guys think that Hal and Sinestro are dead inside the dead zone?
I think they're alive in the dead zone, and that's how they'll be able to come out. They'll have to embrace the light. They'll have to embrace the life force that is them. And that's what will pull them out. That's what will bring them, that's what will give them their freedom and their salvation. Whereas the other people who are in the dead zone are dead. They can't leave. That's who they are. That's where they are. They're stuck there. But Hal and Sinestro will be able to pull out.
Well, that's the way I was reading, too. I was just looking for maybe validation on my own opinion.
Yeah.
When I was reading it, I noticed, for example, Hal and Sinestro, their eyes maintain the same look as they do in the Land of the Living, but yet Tomar Ray, who we see here, his eyes are completely blanked out. So I was looking at it the exact same way. So I'm glad to hear you say that, Jim.
Yeah.
His actual physical appearance, too, is more dead than, there's a different tone to him that if you look at the other two, they still look, even though, I know they're muted and black, and white because they're in that world, but there's something about him where he looks like, he belongs there. Whereas they kind of do because they're in black and white, but it's not the same thing. Is there any link to their being in that zone and what Baz is able to do? And I don't know, this could be me speculating, because I do think some of it is Baz being able to pull this from his own, will and ability, and we're seeing him do something different. But here's what I'm noticing, and this could be me reading too much into that. Do you see that bit where he says, "My best friend, I have to help him"? Look at the eye and the tear that's coming down. That tear, if you look at all the other coloring of the tears, they're like normal colored tears. But when he's doing that during that sequence, you see this black tear that's coming down. Is there some link to the Book of the Black, to where Hal and Sinestro are, where the ring came from, and what's going on with Baz there? I don't know. And this could, like I said, it could be me reading too much into that. I just noticed that one tear, and it's the kind of geeky thing where I'm probably making way too much out of nothing. But I was looking at that sequence again when I did another read through, and it was funny how that just for some reason that when he has the determination, that tear is just a little darker, and yet it shouldn't be because of all the brightness around him. So I don't know if you guys think I'm nuts or if you guys were reading something into that or not. I just thought I'd throw it out there because I just thought it was interesting that I'm fascinated by Baz having this new power that none of them seem to be able to tap into before, whatever that means. And I'm curious to see what's leading to that. Do you guys have any, taking my speculation out of it, do you guys have any speculation as to why Baz is able to do what he's able to do?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you bring up is that the rings, are they still connected to Hal and Sinestro in some way? And is he somehow able to channel some of that? And that combined with his strength of will, is he able to do something the ring couldn't do before? I think that's a very interesting notion. Now, when I read that sequence, I thought it was blood coming out of his eye, not a tear. But it's interesting that you mentioned it could be a black tear.
Yeah, I was of the camp that it was blood. When I first read that, it was one of those pure concentration moments. How you sometimes get in a lot of the movies, you'll get the psychic people who will get the bloody nose because they've been concentrating and focusing so hard. But I took it that he was able to do it because no one ever told him he couldn't do it. You think about the power of the ring, it's based on willpower. It's based on just that whole, no one told him you can't do this with the ring. You can't, there's the limitations on it. So he went into this not thinking there was anything that he couldn't do with it.
That's an interesting notion too. That could be another Guardian lie. We know they're not above that. I don't know. I'm not 100% sold on what I was throwing in there. I guess I was looking for clues, and I see the blood possibility coming out of the eye as well. I guess I was looking later to see any residue from it, and I didn't see it. So I'd be curious to see if we see more of that from Baz as time goes on and what that means. I just liked it because it was something I'm like, ooh, cool, another mystery to solve. And I wasn't like digging my heels in on it. I liked that it was something that I had not seen before in the Green Lantern books that just really stood out for me as being something special and that I cared about wanting to know more of. And here's the other question. Is there more that Baz can do that we don't know yet?
Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised. I mean, we've seen, Sinestro turning their outfits black and telling Hal that there are things that the rings can do that we never thought they could because the Guardians didn't tell us they could. It wouldn't surprise me at all. As Jim points out, no one's told Baz he can't do anything. So he's the perfect candidate to be able to find things that these rings can do that nobody's ever thought of doing with them because of perceived limitations.
How cool is it to see Tomar Ray?
Yeah.
Oh, I never suspected it was Tomar Ray.
Yeah, I didn't either, and I actually loved that because when that reveal came out there, I've had a feeling it was going to be somebody, but I kind of felt like it was somebody we had seen recently. Like I was gonna go like, okay, cool, it's this person or something like that. When that came up, I was blown away. I did not see it coming. Anybody who listening that did see it coming, hey, hats off to you. I did not. See, I actually, you know what, though? I'll say that. I like being surprised like that. I like when there's that shock that you didn't see coming. And it was one of those moments where I'm like, oh, that is cool. I really dug that moment.
Yeah, I mean, he's been dead since Crisis on Infinite Earths.
And it was great to see him come and pay off that way. I thought it was really, really great.
Yeah, I was actually thinking Hal's dad was going to be the bearer.
Oh.
That's who I was thinking the whole time, that it was going to be Hal's dad or Sinestro's sister. Those were the two thoughts I had going through my head.
Okay, with a direct link to either or. I actually kind of liked it because Tomar Ray is directly linked to both.
Yeah,
which was an interesting choice.
I wonder if Tomar Ray will come out alive at some point.
You know what? It's funny with what's going on with the First Lantern and with where this story's going. You can't help but wonder if there's going to be resurrections or changes to the universe afterwards because of what he does, that when things go back, like, is there anybody else that's going to be restored? Is this going to be something will this restore Ganthet?
Yeah, it's wide open.
It's funny how I don't know what's going to happen, and I really enjoy that. I like a story that we got this build to this whole sequence of events. Bam! They drop us into that cliffhanger, and it's like, whoa. Yeah, we should probably jump into talking about Green Lantern Corps next.
Let's continue on with Green Lantern Corps Annual #1. The story and words by Peter J. Tomasi, pencils by Chris Cross, with inks by Scott Hanna and Marlo Alquiza, colorist Will Quintana, Quintana, letterer Steve Wands, cover by Chris Cross and Gabe, Eltaeb, Eltaeb, with associate editor Will Moss, editor Matt Idelson. Wow. I tell you, it was funny because I wanted to make sure not to insult anybody, because this was a story for me visually and just the physical construction of it. I really loved this. I loved how this was laid out, and this was something with on the ink side and the coloring side that it was something that I truly and deeply enjoyed. I've always enjoyed color work on the Green books because they always have that good bam pop to it. But this one had these great, non-traditional panel layouts that I absolutely love in a comic. And those, you got to give credit for the artistic stylings, and the artistic abilities of these creators on this, and then all the books have been, phenomenal, but this annual really hit me.
This is, I think, what we've all been building towards. We wanted to see where this story was going to go. It was funny how I was expecting this to lead to some kind of big confrontation with the Guardians where, we get to see them finally throw down. I didn't expect it to lead to another twist, which was something. Did this surprise either of you? And Myron, I'll go to you. Like in the way that it led to a twist at the end? Or were you kind of expecting, like, okay, it's going to... Because I thought this was going to lead to the big confrontation, and there was going to be... I'm not saying that I thought it was going to be the final end of the story, but I felt like there was going to be some form of beginning to a resolution of some sort in the annual. I didn't expect it to go the direction that it went.
I think I was thinking that before, and then Geoff Johns made a comment about how Rise of the Third Army was really a prelude to Wrath of the First Lantern, and then I was like, well, probably this is going to lead up to the point when all heck breaks loose, and then it's going to go into the finality part, and that this was all set up. So when I started reading the issue, I wasn't really expecting there to be a real conclusion drawn forth. I mean, I thought they did a good job. You know, that was kind of the tricky thing, is because you're not really getting a sense of finality to the story arc. It's really leading into something else. How do you give a satisfactory ending to one story when it really doesn't have an ending? And I thought Tomasi did a wonderful job with this particular issue and wrapping things up in a way that didn't tie a knot anywhere, but it led us into the next big thing and gave us a very satisfactory conclusion.
You know, one thing I want to talk about, I know I'm jumping back a little with this, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about this. I am going to talk a little bit about issue 16, only because Guy and his family, I thought that bit when he was in prison, and, like, we've seen this guy kind of be the black sheep of the family, you know, feel like he was kind of disenfranchised and out of it. When he's talking with his sister and his brother, there's that one bit where she slaps him in the face and kind of starts to wake him up and gets him back in the game and on the roll. And that's when Guy starts to, you know, take over. I'm a Green Lantern, you know, I'm a former Green Lantern and all that kind of stuff, and starting to jump back into Guy mode that we're used to. I really enjoyed that whole direction with that, to see, because it wouldn't have mattered as much if we hadn't seen the history of Guy with his family. Seeing that and then seeing that continue to be developed there, I thought was something that was really neat. Then when you get Baz on the scene and you see Guy, even though Guy doesn't have a ring, Guy is really showing the reason why he's a veteran Lantern and he's a veteran hero, and why in and out of the ring. I think there's something special about these characters, and I think it's important in comics that sometimes we see them without their powers and see them step up to the plate, even if they need to be slapped to do it. Because I thought that it was vintage Guy. It shows the respect level that he's garnered from members of his family, who kind of see his weaknesses but also see the great strengths and see the growth that he's had. I just really enjoyed that, because that felt very human to me. There was something about that moment that really just stood out. I tell you,
Tomasi knows how to write police officers. He knows how to write the cop mindset. And that is something that I've really enjoyed seeing, you know, one in his handling of Green Lantern Corps, because it is, to me, it's an intergalactic police force. But also just seeing Guy and his family and the interactions with them this is something that I really deeply enjoyed about Guy. Guy was never even remotely close to my favorite Lantern. I always wanted to, you know, to one punch him just like Batman. I wanted to smack him around and just, you know, he angered me. But these last couple issues, this last series and run, I've really gotten into Guy, and I've really realized, you know, where he comes from, who he is, and the whole exploration of his family, being a family of cops, and has been something I was like, you know what? This is a great exploration. This is a great Guy. This is, you know, a really cool character that I'm like, I want more of this character, this universe's version of Guy Gardner. And this is, you know, seeing just his family dealing with him and just snapping him back into place, and then when you have this army of unbeatable aliens coming into their house, coming after the police force, what do? They knuckle up and throw down. And I love you love seeing just them, you know, it's the circle the wagons, you know, hunker in tight. We got no chance of winning, but if we're going down, we're taking at least one of them with us. We're going to go down shooting. And that was seeing this play out, and just everything as was going on. I'm like sitting there hoorahing and just cheering as this is playing out. I really and deeply love this.
Yeah, Tomasi really has Guy Gardner's voice down pat, and all the work that he's done to establish the family and the dynamics of that family really paid off in that sequence in the police station. And yeah, I agree with you 100%, Jim. It was one of those hoorah moments.
And especially you think about it when they're sitting there, and Guy tells, Badge to, okay, this group of people send to this location, this group of people send to this location. Get the prisoners out of there, but keep them in their containment units, put them in the middle of the stadium, so if the containment unit breaks down, they're still not able, among the regular everyday population, get the cops into another spot so they can, do their job. I love that, notion. I love that separation and just what he did and how he did it. It was just an absolute, again, a really cool Guy moment, just knowing what the cops have to do, what the ring can do.
What do you guys think about Mogo?
I cheered for that. That was another cheering moment for me. And again, the whole Jon Stewart, everything that's gone on with him and just helping rebuild Mogo and just bring back Mogo. When he first killed Mogo, when he first blew up Mogo, I was like, you know what? I understand why he did it. And I wish there was some other way, but, if anybody... I trust John's judgment, and if I was in this situation, I probably would have had to do the same thing. And you love seeing him beat himself up over it. And then just the quest to bring Mogo back. And then when Mogo came back, she came back shooting. And I love that part about it, just where they're initially not knowing what's going on. No, Mogo's a Green Lantern. She knows what she's doing, and she knows the threat and uses the power to take it out. That's, again, another cheering hoorah moment, especially seeing Mogo back. I love that part.
Yeah, as important as John making the decision to blow Mogo's brains out during War of the Green Lanterns, the resurrection of Mogo is equally as important for the character. And you can see, it's the first time I think I've seen John smile in a while. When he and Fatality were on the beach there, and it's we saved him, and then Fatality says her, and he's got the little smile on his face. I think that John kind of comes full circle a little bit, and I think that helped heal John as much as it did Mogo. And they're really planting the seeds of Fatality and John having a romance, and the two of them are there on the beach. I was waiting for her to jump out of the water with the water coming off of her hair.
The slow motion, yeah.
I liked the whole bit with the discovery of why there were no new lanterns and where these rings were, and that they were being housed in there, and that whole plan of the Guardians with that inoculation. You have to come back to Oa for this inoculation, and really trying to block any possible communication that could divert the lanterns from coming back to Oa to be taken down. This whole plan to finally make their whole Green Lantern Corps a part of the Third Army that they were creating. This trap that they put these people in. The trust violation there. These were their soldiers, the ones that, kind of followed the Guardians' philosophy and were a part of this police force and the loyalty there. The question is, after all of this plays out, what is this going to do to morale? Are there people that aren't going to want to be a part of the Corps anymore? Are they going to want to branch off on their own? What is going to bring them together? Who will be will there be a leader that will bring them all together? Can the Guardians be redeemed after this? And if so, how? Those are questions, that I have. Do you guys have any speculation on what happens to the Guardians after this?
Well, I kind of have, we haven't talked about Red Lanterns number 16 yet, but there's something that takes place in that issue that kind of leads me to believe that we're going to see either the Guardians bonded with what Atrocitus discovers on Maltus. There's going to be a binding of those two things, or the lost ones that are sitting there in the Chamber of Shadows are going to become the new Guardians, and perhaps what Atrocitus found on Maltus is going to be kind of a virtual set of Guardian Council people.
And that's the interesting thing. We're getting new elements, old elements in Atrocitus' case, interspersing and being a part of what's going on with this. I kind of like that. What about Ganthet? Do you guys have any speculation on Ganthet? What do you is Ganthet going to be able to be redeemed from this, do you think? Or is Ganthet a lost cause?
There's always hope. There's always hope. And I gotta think that Ganthet can come back. And I don't know how it's going to happen or who it's going to happen. I was thinking St. Walker possibly could do something, maybe Kyle. But we've already seen the Kyle and Ganthet battle where Kyle couldn't reach Ganthet, in the fight. But now, as a White Lantern, who knows? But part of me thinks we're going to get Ganthet back. He's not going to be an Oa Guardian. I'm thinking he's going to go back to the blue. That it's going to be, hope. It's going to be something's going to pull the Ganthet back. That's going to help and heal Ganthet. And I got to hold on to that feeling that we're going to get him back.
Yeah, I've been desperately clinging to the hope that Ganthet could be resurrected and repaired and redeemed. And every time I've kind of got my hopes up of, maybe this action means he's actually, maybe when he went to find Kyle, he actually was because he snapped out of it after seeing what happened to Sade, and he was going to find Kyle and they were going to snap him out of it and things would be okay. And then they kind of shut that door on that hope. And I was like, man, how is he going to emerge from this thing unscathed? And as it goes on, his situation seems bleaker and bleaker. But I'm still holding out hope, like you, Jim, that he's gonna find a way back, because he's that guardian that's been there from the beginning. He's so symbolic of the entire mythology. So much of that is wrapped up in his guise that I hate the notion that he's going to really be cast in an evil role and is going to go away.
Even if they do a final sacrifice. They have his Darth Vader moment where he redeems himself in death, and just that final moment. Kyle, you were right. There's really Ganthet. Even if we have that moment from him, I'd be happy with it. I'm like, I would rather have Ganthet around, but if we got to go with that route, fine. But I don't want him to end as a heel. I don't want him to end as a bad guy. I want the good Ganthet back.
Now, do you think the First Lantern was waiting for this battle, patiently waiting for this opportunity to use their constant battling as a way to shatter his own prison to escape? Was this something that was, like, all along his endgame?
I think he saw it coming. I think he saw the Guardians' power dwindle the more they stretched themselves thin, and he was waiting for the moment. Yeah, I don't think that was his plan all along, but I think he saw the opportunity coming. Especially
when they start pulling more and more on his power, and they started depending more and more on him. I think that was the turning point for him. Initially, he was probably just in pain, wanting to get out. And then he started buying his time. Like, okay, I got a shot here. It's one of those things where a prisoner's constantly looking for a way out. And then when they finally get that one moment, it's either act now or forever be a prisoner. And so he had his opening. He had his shot. He's like, I got to go for it. And bam.
Yeah, and that was something that you knew that he was at some point in time going to escape. Now, what do you think his nature is? Good, bad, gray area? Obviously, his anger and his rage is really apparent from, what's happened to him. I am very curious to see, is this going to put the Lanterns and the Guardians on the same side or on opposing sides? What's going to happen, because of this? Because sometimes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Are they going to have to work together, or... I'm just very curious. So do you guys have any speculation on that? Because obviously this is somebody who's more powerful than all of them, right?
Yeah, this is some serious power levels, and I think his intention, you can kind of see in that last page. Your core, your hunters, your army, everything you've created, Guardians, will be no more, and the universe will be once again be mine. I'm thinking we got a universal conquering type person here. Mm-hmm. This is going to be we have to unify all of us against him to stop him. And I'm hoping this is the redemption of Ganthet. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, Volthoom is not a new character, but he's not one that we've ever had anything fleshed out about the character before. So obviously this is a brand new 52 take on Volthoom. So yeah, it's hard to tell what his motivation is, other than obviously he has a deep-seated hatred for the Guardians and everything they've ever created. So I don't see the Lanterns working with Volthoom or the First Lantern to go after the Guardians. But yeah, I could see the Guardians kind of saying, well, maybe we were a little hasty here. Maybe we made some bad decisions. Hey, let's team up against the First Lantern and take him out, and then we'll fix things. I would hope that the Corps wouldn't trust that,
But then again, as you say, the enemy of my enemy is my ally, even if it's only for a short while.
Now, Volthoom, are they doing with Volthoom kind of like what they did with Necron? They're taking this character and kind of expanding on him? Like, what, I've got to admit, I was aware that Volthoom had a past history. But, Myron, what is your understanding or what is your experience with the history of Volthoom? Because that was something I was particularly interested to talk to you about.
Volthoom originally comes from Earth 3, with the crime syndicate. Mm-hmm. And Volthoom was kind of a monk. He was the power source. He was the power behind Power Ring's power battery. Ah. And we never really saw, I don't know if he ever even got panel time. I think he was mentioned before, but I don't think he's necessarily been given a great deal of exposure. So obviously Geoff Johns is kind of pulling this piece of DC history and finding a way to bring it back into the New 52. It'll be interesting to see if he maintains that history. Does Volthoom come from the multiverse? Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. It could be a completely fresh take, and he just liked the name. I highly doubt it, knowing Geoff Johns. I think obviously he's going to pull on history, so it'll be interesting to see what his take on this is. But yeah, he never was a very established character, and he certainly really didn't have any interaction with the Guardians or HAL or the Green Lantern Corps at all previously, other than how his history helped create Power Ring.
And the universe will be mine again. That idea of that Volthoom was in a position. Did the Guardians dethrone Volthoom? Or was this when the Guardians first initiated Volthoom? Which I guess with Volthoom, I'm wondering which came first, the chicken or the egg. I'm generally thinking that way with this character, with this take on it. I don't know which one came first out of the two of them. I guess my question is, when they call him the first Lantern, was it that the Guardians trapped him and made him into a lantern? And used him as a power source, going off of, the original history with the character, or is it something else? I'm just because they're using him as they've been using him as like a power source, so to speak, now for this third army. So I'm very curious to see what that history is, because there's a Geoff Johns history of using entities as power sources. And trapping them into lanterns and channeling them and different things like that. And I'm just curious to see what Volthoom's history was with that. I'm not saying that I'm 100% sold that that's exactly what it is, but I'm insanely curious. And I like that. I like that he's playing around with that and making us kind of question what Volthoom, like how long has Volthoom been around? Do you think he predates the Guardians? Or do they predate him? Or what do you think's going on there?
My hunch is that it's going to be tied to Krona. Mm-hmm. I almost, because we've seen in the past that Krona created the little green gauntlet. I almost think that perhaps Krona somehow discovers Volthoom, and it's because of Volthoom's ability to manipulate the emotional spectrum that leads him to develop the gauntlet in the first place, is my hunch.
Okay.
That actually is that's a cool idea. This is one of those with me and speculations. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea. And this is part of my enjoyment of this stuff, is when you've got such a rich history that I'm like, I don't know what to go with. I don't know where it's going to go. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, I don't really have a speculation there either. I thought I would throw it out because I'm liking thinking through this and wondering what the history is. I like what Myron was mentioning, how Geoff Johns is pulling from the past mythos, and that there's going to be ties to what we've known, but there's an expansive take on it. With the fact that it was something that's been previously tied to Power Ring, there's an opportunity that that still can be the case in that universe, and this could be our universe's Volthoom. Because that element is there too. Because it's not unheard of in the multiverse. Well, obviously that's kind of the nature of the multiverse, that there's multiple versions of certain characters. So how does that play out in the New 52 with these power sources? I like the idea that he was tapped from the multiverse. I like the idea that this is our universe's version as well. I don't really have a preference there. I'm insanely curious to figure out what they're doing, because that's kind of a neat part. Because you could create a whole brand new character from scratch. I liked that it's an existing concept that they're bringing in, and with it being the New 52, you have some wiggle room to really play around with this. I wonder how long ago this came into the mind of Geoff Johns. I would love to know that. like this idea of bringing Volthoom back in. Because, he obviously had certain stories that were a part of his master plan, and then as things I'm sure were fleshed out, directions started expanding and veered off and went new places that he didn't experience. So I'm wondering how long this idea of a first lantern was in his head, and how much it stuck to his original game plan, and how much it veered off and changed along the way. Because I'm assuming that there's been a lot of twists and turns with how rich and involved. Because I'm sure when he originally envisioned any of the things that he did envision from this, he had no idea at the time that there would be this many different lantern books out there and concepts being thrown out as well. So I would be very, very curious to see how far ahead he got on this.
And here's something that just kind of popped in my head. You figure if this Volthoom is this universe's version of the guy, and in our universe he's evil, so that would mean in the other universe he's a good guy. If you go with the whole opposites spectrum, which would explain why Power Ring would trap him and use him as a power source, because Power Ring's the bad guy, so he traps this good powerful entity and uses him to power his own evil means.
Well, being a part of a different universe doesn't always mean evil. We see that with Earth 2.
No, I'm thinking, but that isn't Earth 3. That's the opposite universe.
Oh,
right?
okay. I see what you're saying, where villains are heroes and heroes are...
Right.
Okay. So, unless it is the Volthoom from that universe.
Right, true.
Because I wasn't thinking of it that way until Myron threw it out there. I'm like, oh, that's a really good possibility. That maybe that this is their universe. Because the Guardians have shared that they know there's multiple universes in the New 52, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that they are aware of and they have access to, which we haven't seen played around with a lot. So there's an opportunity here to really explore that. So I'm curious to see. That does put what Myron's saying on the table. So I don't know. I think both possibilities are an option. I think there's a third possibility, a fourth or fifth possibility that's out there as well. But I like that kind of, this could go a lot of different directions, because that gets me excited for the story as well. Guys, do you want to talk a little, and we'll wrap up with this, Red Lanterns real quick, just because, Myron, you started to go there. And sure. I think maybe we'll wrap up with that, and then we'll continue with everything else next week. I think it's a good stopping point. So we'll take a look at issue number 16, and we can kind of talk casually about the rest, which is Once We're Enemies, Rise of the Third Army issue, which is Peter Milligan on writing, Andres Guinaldo, guest penciler, Bit guest inker, Rain Barredo, colorist, Carlos M. Mangual, letterer, Miguel Sepulveda and Barredo on cover, Kate Stewart, assistant editor, Will Moss, editor, and apologies for name butchery. This is a title that I've really liked its handling of this storyline, because, again, you've got a title with characters who have this unique power source of rage, and Atrocitus's rich history with the Guardians, his anger towards the Guardians, his anger towards the Manhunters, and that whole concept for what it did to his world. And we see here that Atrocitus now has to use these machines that were created by the Guardians against the Guardians. It's a chance for his ultimate revenge. This is, again, a changed Atrocitus. We've seen Atrocitus gradually changing, evolving. I don't know if you call his change good or bad for Atrocitus on what's going on there, but it's something that I've really loved in this book, that he hasn't stayed like stagnant. We've seen that as the power source of the Red Lanterns has shattered, this has put in a position where he's a little bit weaker than we're used to seeing with him, and not as in touch with his rage, the thing that drives him. He's actually looking towards some of his history and to his Red Lanterns, and to kind of reconnect with that part of himself, but also to hold on to his power and control over his core, which at times is tentative at best. I really love the political dynamic that this book has gradually developed, because it's helped, I think, set it apart from the other books, yet at the same time having it reflect and have commentary on what's going on in the universe has given, I think, kind of a unique view in what's going on in the Green Lantern books. I think that's really essential if you're going to do a title that is about a different core. you've got to really show me how their viewpoint into it is going to be different than the other books, because there's got to be a validity to having this title. And I think that's slowly been developed over the time. You know what? Actually, I would like to throw this to you, Myron, though. We've had you on before, and you've shared that this has been kind of a book you've been lukewarm on as the time's gone on. How has your relationship with this title changed? Has it stayed the same? What has that ride been like? Because I know it's been kind of a roller coaster for you.
Yeah, I think of the 4 books, Red Lanterns has been the one, as you put it, I've been a little lukewarm about. Now, I think the introduction of Rancor, to me, jumped the book up a little bit. Watching him go through and lose his humanity and struggling with that, to me, has been very compelling. And I think where I kind of lost it a little bit with the title was, I already know Atrocitus' history, and I didn't want to keep revisiting it over and over again. Here, it makes so total sense to have him on the planet that everything took place on, on Riot, and finding the Manhunters and using them. I mean, it's such irony to use them to go after the Guardians when that's exactly what the Guardians did to him. So I thought that was really kind of neat. But yeah, I love seeing Rancor. Rancor in particular made the book go up a notch or two for me, and the Return of the 5 Inversions, definitely.
The inversions were a big one for me because it was this thing that was a part of the Zero issue, and I guess I had no idea that this would be this infection that was below the surface in this book. I really enjoyed that reveal. I felt like a dunce when that was.
I was thinking it was Guardians doing something. I wasn't even thinking these guys. I was thinking either a Guardian plant or something like that they were intentionally milking the energy somehow.
Yeah, I kind of thought that the Guardians had, because they've been playing Puppet Master all along.
Yeah.
They obviously have been taking advantage of anything that's been going on with the other core and taking advantage of any weaknesses that they've shown. They've also been playing groups like the Star Sapphires and the whole universe, like Lady Styx and stuff like that. I've kind of liked that kind of expanse too, that they've been taking each of the galactic powers and kind of playing around with them a little bit like little puppet masters and doing it behind the scenes very slowly. Again, it's funny how when they talk about the inoculation when they were calling the Green Lanterns back to Oa, they've been in their own way an infection spreading throughout the universe. They've been doing little tiny things to change the political climate, changing relationships, having circumstance put them in a better position to take control from any possible resistance they could have from their own core and also from any of the other possible sources on the outside. That's been a great part of this journey, has been the brilliantly laid plan. And that's something I've really enjoyed seeing also come to fruition as we see in the Red Lantern books. I agree with what you're saying, Myron, how Rancor kicked this book. I've already been previously enjoying this title, but boy, did Rancor's introduction in this really give me a different take on it, because it made me connect to the whole Red Lantern concept. When you see this guy struggle with, do I embrace the rage or do I hold on to my humanity? A lot of times when you see a character inherit great power, you're like, I want to do that. I want to be a part of that. This case, it's this struggle, and you're giving up yourself to become this almost mindless rage beast. You know, when you hit a certain point in time, it's hard to come back. Is it possible to come back? We've seen with the Red Lanterns, unless Atrocitus allows it to be so, you're pretty much so doomed to head down this path of being more mindless to the whole situation, not as alert and coherent as we see. Until he felt there was a need to have an advisor, a potential foil to his thoughts. He didn't really see the need to have anybody in that coherent position that he's in. So it's interesting to see Rancor be another person that maybe Atrocitus can play off of a little bit because of the fact that he's still got that duality. I've really enjoyed that because I think it's shown us a different side of Atrocitus that we haven't seen previously, which goes to what you're saying, Myron. It's a little fresher in the book.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting that, I think Peter Milligan, when he got this title, he's kind of dealt a difficult hand to play out because those characters in the very beginning, they didn't really have any personalities. They couldn't interact with each other because it was all just grunting and venting and puking red energy. So he had to spend some time getting them from point A to point B before he could get here and really investigate these characters more. And now that he's there, it's been really much more interesting.
I like that we got to see the relationship with Atrocitus and Bleeze develop before Rancor was introduced onto the scene. Because now when you see Rancor's different relationships with both Atrocitus and Bleeze, it's far more interesting to see where Bleeze, especially, both of them trying to one-up each other. And Bleeze is trying to use this opportunity to say, hey, you be good to me, I'll be good to you. Kind of trying to play off of his humanity, recognizing that she's an opportunist. And seeing Rancor reject that, and then her reaction to that rejection, I thought was such a beautiful moment in this. I really enjoyed that development, which I think meant more because we saw what it was like, and that Bleeze isn't quite done yet trying to get a little bit more power for herself. Another ally in her corner would certainly be a great feather in her cap for her own ambitions. I like that in this title.
Well, another ally, but more importantly, the power of constructs.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that she's like, just a little bit of your blood, just let me have your power. Nothing, big, and hey, look what you can get in its place. Come on. I love that was a great play out because, again, her dealings with the Star Sapphire kind of opened her up to other ideas and other concepts, not just pure rage. Got her back in touch with partially of who she was before, but there still is Bleeze, the agent of rage. She is still just this, quote unquote monster, if you will. And I loved seeing part of her old world and her new world kind of coming together, in her temptation of Rancor. And I chuckled just at the one scene where he's just like, kind of that deer in the headlights look, and you're like, dude, what are you thinking, man? This is not a smart move. And he's like, I'm out of here.
Yeah, old habits die hard for Bleeze, and she kind of fell back when trying to be the nice person didn't help. She fell back on the old habits, and then it really backfired on her.
Yeah, it's one of the things as I'm like looking through this whole sequence. Do you wonder when she grabbed him by the throat, if like she missed her boat, her opportunity there? As I was reading it, I was like sitting here. We got this girl jumping the gun,
yeah,
and you wonder if like how many times she's done that in the past with other potential allies. If that's ultimately where she's doomed. I think this is something where like another core and another character with another background wouldn't have been in that place. Because that was something that, kind of like where you guys have been going with her, I've been playing through in my head, like, where does she always go wrong? And I find that fascinating about her, that I'm always trying to see where she's going to go wrong next.
Yeah, if she could have had just a little bit more patience, she probably could have pulled it out. But again, she is an agent of rage. I don't think patience is their strong suit. So you see her just, reacting. I will have you now.
Yeah, I don't think that's in the Red Lantern Oath anywhere.
Little patience.
Patience is a virtue, and virtue is its own reward.
That's funny. As this goes on with Atrocitus, what happens when he actually, if the Guardians are taken down? What happens to Atrocitus? Like, that's a driving force for him. So what happens when revenge is achieved? Or they're, like, negated? What does that mean for him?
He becomes a goat herder in Ireland somewhere.
I like that you turned him into a shepherd.
Well, yeah, I can kind of see it. I can, see him tending to the flock, and just because he is a nurturing kind of person.
He opened up a bar somewhere,
So with him discovering, and Myron, you were trying to talk about this before, and I know you were trying to avoid getting spoilery about this. So you were mentioning what he discovers, and that he
yes,
and
yes.
I know you were going to Corona. So how do you think that this affects things? How does this? Where do you see that going?
Well, and I obviously never saw this coming, where he went to Maltus and he discovers what. It's hard to tell what it is, and I almost, a part of me thinks that when Krona did what he did and the Guardians undertake their mission to, lead a life without emotion, is this the emotions of the Guardians before they became the Guardians? Or is this their souls before they became the Guardians we know? Is this their captured essences? And that's the only thing I could walk away from with. I'm interested in hearing what your guys' take is on it. But it really does change the playing field, because could these be reunited with the physical bodies of the Guardians as they are?
And what happens if they're all released?
Yeah. I'm utterly fascinated with what this is, and I don't know if this is their souls, is this their essences, is this just their emotional bodies? You know, is Ganthet in there because when they excise the emotion from him, this is where it went? Is this holding all their emotional beings? You know, I'm interested in hearing what you guys thought, because that's kind of how I took it, but I could see the possibilities for it being a bunch of other things too.
I guess my question is, okay, they abandoned Malthus, and when they did that, these ghost faces, are they all people who stood in the way of the Guardians? Is part of the Guardians' essence there? Is this when they purged their own emotions? What is that in there? I didn't know. I was seeing a lot of different possibilities from it. I did see, like, the possibility that releasing these things would bring back entities. You know, this would obviously bring back Corona and stuff like that. What else is in there, though? I don't know. I don't think we saw enough to think that. But I don't know, like, Jim, did you have any speculation on that?
Part of me was, you know, I've gone through a couple different ideas. You know, the initial thought when I saw this was the emotions, this was the quote unquote soul of the Guardians. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, okay, again, I'm looking for ways for Ganthet to come back. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, this is going to be Ganthet's way of coming back. But these are the ancient versions of the Guardians. So I'm thinking this is who they were before they became Guardians, back when they were more humanoid. So I'm thinking they cast these aside for that superhuman power that they got as Guardians. So if they get these souls back, they stop being the Guardians of the Universe. They become these creatures that have lived for a very long time and have a lot of knowledge, but I don't think they'll have the super energy blasts and whatnot that is the Guardian. So I think this is a way to quote unquote save them, but it's not going to be saving the Guardians. It's going to be getting rid of the Guardians, and it's going to be making quote unquote new Guardians. They're going to be more human. They're going to have their emotions. They're going to be more humanoid. They're going to be their original versions of what they were. And I don't know if that's Atrocitus's plan, or if he even realizes what's going to happen, or how this is going to play out. But I think this is how we're going to get the Guardians back, and this is where the Green Lantern universe is going to go. We're not going to have the super powerful little blue guys anymore. We're going to have incredibly intelligent who've lived millennium, but they're not going to be the immortals that they were. And I think we're going to actually get them, maybe even seeing them live life and have them get used to being humanoid again.
You know, it's when and this adds some weight to what both of you are saying here. Atrocitus. Do you not recognize me, Atrocitus? It is I, your ancient enemy. I who programmed the Manhunters to wipe out your sector. I've waited many centuries to speak to you, old foe. He waited many centuries. Now, we've seen Krona speak to him. So, but it wasn't this Krona.
Right.
Is that where you guys are going with this?
Yeah, I'm almost like, obviously he shares memory with the Krona we saw in the War of the Green Lanterns, but somewhere this part was excised from him, or is it a copy? You know what I mean? Is it a copy, or is it been separated from him? Is it an actual portion of him? And that remains to be seen. And I think that's what's really intriguing about this. And it's funny because this kind of slipped under the radar because not a lot of people talked about this part of the issue. And to me, this is the biggest part of this whole story, to me at least.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's one of the things that I really love about this title. Is it tends to be that title when you have something like this that hits it from an angle that you don't see coming, because it is such a unique perspective, and they're outside, like they're not being called to OA for inoculations and stuff like that. So it's got to go a different direction. It's got to look at things from a different angle. You know, you mentioned anthology previously on the episode, and it's great that this universe lends itself for more storytelling. Where you can do stuff with the Indigo Tribe and the Blue Lanterns. There's a lot of room to explore and expand more, like what we're getting right here. But this is where this book, I think, is shined when you introduce Rancor, and then you introduce some of Atrocitus's background with the inversions. You bring the inversions back, and you've got a weaker Lantern there because of it. but then Atrocitus has to compensate by going to the creatures that destroyed everything for him. Brings him face to, like, how alert is he? Is he strong enough to listen to this Krona, who I think is going to help him? And, if this was their essences, would Atrocitus be the one to release them? Would he do it? How torn would you be? No, because this is the one that did it
for him,
Yeah.
Well, what happens to the Guardian Essence if the body has been destroyed? Is this the only way Atrocitus could truly kill Krona? Because the physical body's already destroyed. Well, once I kill this essence, I've now killed Krona. That could be his motivation to doing it if this is his only chance of killing Krona. Right here, by releasing this essence so it dissipates into the universe and it's no more. Okay, he may do that. And in doing that, he may save the other Guardians.
Yeah, I don't know. See, I guess I'm looking at it as this is perhaps a more benevolent Krona, than maybe a more rational Krona that we've seen before. I don't know. Because the way he's almost pleading to talk to him, he wants to talk to him. For what purpose? Did he purge his own emotions out of guilt for what he did? I'm wondering if there's that side of it. Go ahead, Myron.
Sure, and maybe that's the reason why the Guardians have ended up the way they did, is because they didn't embrace those emotions. They tried to divorce themselves from it, and that drove them to the point that they're at now. Yeah,
I'm really curious about that. It's funny how it's a very short couple of panels, and it teases so much.
Yeah.
To the point where you could really go into a lot of different directions from it. But I like that kind of stuff. That, to me, gets me excited and interested on where this is going to go. And you're right. I think it's something that's very easy, Myron, as you mentioned, to ignore. Or to maybe not give as much weight to. But I think it's a much more pivotal piece than we all realize. Guys, what I'm going to suggest is let's stop here and let's go ahead and say we're going to do a two-parter, because I think what this will give us the advantage to do is we can finish talking about some of the other titles that are in the Green Lantern universe next week, but also this gives us an opportunity then to really jump the gun and talk about Green Lantern number 17, which kicks off the whole First Lantern thing, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Works for me.
Myron, before we wrap up, though, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone first a little bit about the blog of OA and the podcast of OA, where they can find you if they haven't been listening to our show long enough to know about your podcast and your wonderful website.
Well, thanks, Sean. I started the blog of OA about 3.5 years ago. I can't believe it's been 3.5 years. But I started the blog mainly because of this show, because of Raging Bullets. I was inspired to get back into comics, and your guys' enthusiasm for the hobby really got me pumped up. And then I was like, well, I've been a lifelong fan of the Green Lantern mythology. Quite frankly, the Green Lantern mythology helped me get through some physical issues I had as a kid, and quite frankly, it helped me save my own life as a child. And I wanted to give something back to the mythology in a very positive way, and I wanted to be an ambassador for Green Lantern, much like I look at this show as being a great ambassador for DC Comics. So I started the blog of OA, and about a year or so into the blog, I met up with a person that I work with who was interested in doing podcasting, and he said, well, hey, why don't we do a podcast about Green Lantern? And he started reading the books, so we started up the podcast of OA. So for anybody who hasn't been there before, the URL is www.blogofoa.com. You can find all kinds of reviews there, information about the Green Lantern universe, previews of things. I do some contests every now and then. We have a Facebook group, and you can also find the podcast through there as well. Plus, we're on iTunes.
And it's terrific. Your website is one of my must-go-to sources for Green Lantern information. It's a beautiful website. I amaze me with how impeccable it's maintained, and I love the podcast. It's funny, we talked about off the air in between recordings. There's times where, because we've had such a rich relationship with you, I can't believe it's been over 3.5 years that we've known you, that there's times where I don't remember if we had discussions with you on our show or on yours. Because we'll do these long, lengthy marathons like we do, where usually when you're on, I think we're pretty much so set for a two-parter. But I really enjoy having you on, and I want to thank you for coming on for this segment, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again next week as we kind of wrap up this catch-up with the whole Green Lantern universe.
It is entirely my pleasure.
Now I can get out of here.
Hi, Sean and Jim. This is Jason from Connecticut, and I'm just calling about your Pop Culture and Whatnot episode. I used to listen to your podcast for a few years, but since then, with the reboot from DC, I sort of stopped reading DC, but I'm still reading a lot of Marvel and Image books. So it was really awesome to hear you guys talk about stuff outside of DC that I'm currently reading. But the main reason I'm calling is because a few times in your conversation you mentioned the first page of Marvel books that have a recap of the previous issues, and that makes it a lot easier to follow along or get involved in a book. Well, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but on many Marvel books there is a little logo at the bottom that says AR, and that's for the Marvel Augmented Reality app. If you have a smartphone, you could get the app and scan it, and a lot of the times on the cover it'll give you a recap of the last issue, or in some cases it'll give you some really cool background information, like some of the characters being animated and talking, and it's really cool, and I think it makes it a lot easier for people to get into new books. And I figured I'd let you guys know about that in case you didn't already know, because I think it's a great feature. Anyway, keep up the great work with the show, and I hope all's going well. Thank you.
First of all, thanks for the call, and thanks for the feedback on that, because I didn't know if those episodes with Pop Culture Whatnot would generate an audience, maybe, like you said, of people who had listened to our show previously, their reading habits have changed, and that wasn't an original intention of those episodes. It was kind of more to give us an opportunity to share a little bit more of ourselves with our listening audience, but I'm glad that people can pick and choose and download the episodes of our show that apply to them, and I think that's really neat, so thank you. That's feedback that's good for me to know that there's that added bonus to doing those episodes, as I'm sure there's people who maybe just want to listen to our DC episodes that skip those. And I think that, I'm hoping there's some flexibility with our podcast that people can enjoy, because we do lengthy episodes. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to enjoy our podcast in different ways, and that fits your time. And so that's cool. Thank you for that feedback. I did not know about the augmented reality app, to be perfectly honest with you. So that was a very cool phone call that you came in with. I like those added things that kind of refresh my memory, kind of bring me back in. I read a lot of books. I love everything I'm reading. But a lot of times I'll jump at an issue and I'll have to look back at the previous issue just to kind of refresh my memory again real quick. And to have those initial front pages, my Valiant books do this too, and I really dig it. It's just nice to get that spin, and a lot of times the writers, when they do it, they'll retell in something maybe that you didn't catch before in that initial one page in their recap of it. It's kind of a different spin on what happened because it's a summary with a little character twist thrown in or something that is really helpful. So I enjoy that. I think those are very worthwhile, and I'd love to see more of those across comics. I think they're neat. But the augmented reality app, I am so going to try that, and thank you for pointing that out, because I think it's a very cool thing to check out. And thanks for listening to those episodes.
Hey, Sean and Jim, this is Noel from Chicago. I just listened to episode 341 about the Batman number 17, the end of Death of the Family. Loved your guys' comments on it. I only have one question. Now that everything's been revealed and we're to believe that the Joker did not know, and even when Bruce, went to Arkham and basically showed him who he was and Joker wasn't interested, why did the Joker take such an interest in Alfred? I understand that Batman is, the face of Batman Inc., but you think that if the Joker wanted to really mess with Batman, he would have kidnapped Bruce Wayne, not Bruce Wayne's butler. So it almost seems like, to me, that when Bruce went to visit the Joker in Arkham, and he, basically was himself and held up the card, Joker may not have been interested, but I think the Joker did actually, kind of maybe put that in the back of his mind. So I almost wonder if, he doesn't know who the rest of the Bat family is, but I almost wonder if he does know that Batman is Bruce Wayne, but he's not willing to use that as part of, that doesn't play into his game. That's why he didn't want Penguin, Two-Face, and Riddler to be involved in the finale, because he didn't want any of that revealed. But it just seems like, why did he kidnap Alfred otherwise and mess with Alfred so much when it would have been better to use Bruce Wayne or to use Commissioner Gordon or somebody that is more publicly tied to Batman and Batman's family. Alfred is just the butler of the money guy. So that's the only thing I'm curious about, and I just wondered where you guys stood on that. That's about it. Keep up the good work, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
My take on that was that he went to Bruce Wayne's house to get Bruce Wayne and just wound up with Alfred instead. And I think it was because of the Batman Inc. ties. But again, that's me speculating, very similar to how you are. So, I mean, and I liked your speculation on, this being something subconsciously the Joker won't let himself see, which goes back to what Bruce was saying all along. He doesn't know because he doesn't want to know. And he will not let himself see that. And Bruce is into the Joker's psyche. And I think the one area where I veer off from you a little bit on that, I agreed with everything you said when you got to the point that saying that the Joker consciously did not want the Penguin and Two-Face because he was trying to keep the secret from them. I don't think that was the case. I think it goes back to, I think he didn't want them part of his coup de grace because that was his coup de grace. He wants it to go the way he wanted it to go. And it was his final reveal, and that he didn't want to share that moment with them. I agree with you, though, that there is a possibility that subconsciously this guy knows and he went that route because of it. But I think the Batman Inc. tie with Bruce Wayne being so public as being the person behind it would be a reason to go to Bruce Wayne's mansion and get Alfred as well. So I don't know. I'm not against your idea. I actually think your idea is cool and interesting. So that subconsciously, because that fits kind of what Bruce is saying. Bruce is convinced that he would not let himself see that it was me. And I think that is very much deeply ingrained. I mentioned on the show when we did it, the Chronicles of Narnia story, the magician's nephew and the uncle, and how he would not let himself believe that the animals could talk. And I really hearken to that with the Joker. I think psychologically, people, especially with the Joker's case, with the deep psychological issues that he has, can convince themselves of whatever they want to convince themselves of, to the point where it's so powerful they will not let themselves see what's right in front of them. And one of the things that I think works of the Death of the Family storyline is that the Joker will not let himself psychologically see certain things. I think that's why the Jason Todd thing works. He lets himself see what he wants to see with Jason, but not enough. If you look at that origin story, I don't know if you've read Red Hood and the Outlaws, but for anybody that has, if you look in that origin story, never in the Joker's retelling of it is there the Bruce Wayne and Jason Todd relationship in there. Those are cleverly left out. I don't think they're cleverly left out. I think that's the Joker focused on the things he wanted to focus on when he was watching Jason's life. If you believe that actually played out that way. If it's not some crazy thing the Joker dreamed up in his head after he bashed the kid. I don't know. That's a very interesting, that Jason Todd one's my gray area. Every other one of the Bat family, you can see how the Joker was tracking where they were going and watching, Nightwing kept following the circus and he kept appearing to help the circus, which is why he did all the things he did with the circus. Did he actually know that was Dick Grayson? No. He was playing around with that. So it fits the whole MO that the Joker is not letting himself see, and that's why Bruce is not worried, because he just knows this is a psychological thing. And these are extreme psychological people, the ones that he's facing, that have these issues. He went there on purpose all those years ago to see, do I have to worry about this? If I do, I need to know now so I know how to deal with it. And in that moment, he knows that, and I'm with you. I think we as the reader are kind of in the place where we can be sympathetic to Bruce's family and kind of go, why, they're crying foul, because they're saying a lot of the same things you are saying, how do you explain this and how do you explain that? And that's the problem with it. You have to really believe at the end, and the only person I think, maybe Alfred believes Bruce, but Bruce is 100% sold on the fact that I know the Joker better than anybody, and I'm telling you, this guy does not know. You got to put a lot of faith in that. And that's where the story gets uncomfortable, and that's the point of the story, is that you're putting faith that what Bruce is saying and what he believes about the Joker is the truth. And I think that's the interesting point. It matches a lot of what you're saying, because I don't know, is it subconsciously he went after Alfred for that reason? That's possible. The way you laid that out is very possible. But again, he won't let himself fully see it because it's that wall that he has put in psychologically in his head. And, I think the best Joker stories are the ones that focus on the psychology of the guy, where you get in there and go, woof, major issues. The Joker won't let himself see his past. Look at his reaction when Batman was saying, I know who you are, and I'm going to bring that over there. The Joker has walled off his own past to the point where when you try to get to the root of the origin of the character, and I think that's been brilliant with writers that have done that, where they've made us say the reason why there's so many different variations on the Joker's origin is because nobody really knows the truth on who this guy's past was. We know he was dumped into a vat during his his fight with Batman. That's a consistent part of it. But anything before that is speculation. And those are story threads that are being put together. Bruce doesn't know his real identity. And that's also something the Joker has walled off just as much as he's walled off the identity Bruce Wayne. And that's a part of who he is at his core. And Bruce has faith in it because of that. And I think that's why a lot of us as the readers, when we're done, can look at that and go, okay, I see Batman's side. But I totally understand the people that are saying, nah, I'm going with the family on this one, and crying foul. You're putting a lot on faith there. That's where it's a cool story, because I think there's a reality to that. The family's reaction is very real. Bruce's reaction is very real. I side with Bruce because I believe him, but I can also see the audience that doesn't. It's cool. I think that puts us all in an interesting ground where I think we can appreciate each other's perspective, because it really depends on who we're siding with and who we're believing on this. And it's kind of cool. That's what's the great thing about this discussion. Like your voicemail here, I really loved your take on this, because I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, I can see why he's feeling this way. I don't know that I'm totally in the same place, but I get where he got there. And that's what's neat. I don't know that there's a right or wrong, and I don't know that that's the point. I think this was an insanely interesting phone call for me because of that, and I think that's where the story has a lot of replay value down the road. We're going to keep talking about this one, and that's neat.
How you doing, guys? This is Brandon calling out of New Orleans again. Here to talk about some comics. First off, I don't like to gloat much, but I'd like to say, if you go a couple of episodes back when we first started talking about Death of the Family, one of my first predictions was the Joker might have been trying to plant the seeds of splitting the family up in some sort of fashion, and, well, there we go. It was true. So, wow, what an epic conclusion. Get that off the table. I'm the Bat fan. I had to get that out of there, and I called today to talk about two specific books that I just got through reading, and I was very excited for. We'll go with first the related to Batman, the Red Hood and the Outlaws, the aftermath to the Red Hood, and man, what a great issue. I dropped off of this title for a little while, and that's why I'm kind of excited to talk about it today, because with the new creator, and I jumped on with the tie-ins to Death of the Family. So I was, I decided to go ahead and give it a shot with the aftermath, and I am so glad I did with Lobdell and the rest of the guys, the creative team, the artists taking over. What a great issue. The moments with him and Damian in the beginning, we're good. They're a little bickering back and forth. When the guys meet up and they're glad to see him in the front of the mansion and everything, it's a good heartfelt issue in that manner in the beginning, when everybody just kind of, it's relieved, it's all over with, and they're getting to meet back up. I love the little tie-in to Batman Incorporated. With Wingman and Redbird there, people say there's no continuity tie-in, and I guess they threw that in there to say, hey, here we go. But anyway, to keep going, the Dick Grayson and the not wanting to say hi, that's kind of weird. I know Dick's kind of hurt from everything going on, but you would think that he would at least go to say hi to Starfire. Is. I don't know the past relationship much in this continuity, but still, I think that's kind of out of character for Dick. But still, it's I guess he's still kind of hurt from all of it. But to go on, the fight between Damian and Arsenal, oh my God, great stuff. And then finally Red Hood gets his moment with Bruce. You know, he says things that needed to be said, but never, you know, Todd would never say things out loud to him. So it was a good moment there to kind of bring everything to a conclusion with their relationship that's been going on for years and years with, you know, again, this is the New 52, so we don't know exactly what went on with Red Hood when he came back and to the extent of what he did and this continuity to the family, but we know it was bad, so to have him kind of, you know, say, hey, listen, yeah, you did good, and you're your own man, I'm proud of you. It was good. And I don't know what happens at the end with the Joker still getting another last laugh with him, but man, I was shocked and my jaw dropped. I was wow. So I'm excited to go on with this book. I really am. I'm glad that I jumped on again, and I'm glad that I'm continuing on. And then again, I read Justice League of America #1 came out this week. You know, Geoff Johns with all the shakeups in Green Lantern, him leaving the titles. I'm not too excited about that, but then again, you know, you have to look at the good side of it, and I'm sure, you know, the guy, he's very passionate about what he does, and you got to believe that he's walking away from Green Lantern because he wants to put his passion and focus into, obviously, the Justice League titles and the things he's doing with Aquaman, and I'm guessing now 5. I haven't picked up that issue, but after reading this one, I actually think I want to. I wasn't too sure about 5, but I should always have faith in Johns. You know, everything I've read from the guy, I consistently love. It's not always great. When it is great, it's great, but it's never let me down. The guy is a very consistent writer. I do love him. And this issue was great. Bringing a team together, big epic start. I don't know much about a lot of these characters, so I love Jones's writing. He just has a way of bringing you in and kind of introducing you to him. The conversation with Waller and Steve Trevor through the whole issue is awesome. Of course, the way for her to finally convince him to come in is a kiss between Superman and Wonder Woman, showing him the picture, you know, the whole Batman scene that he saw from the satellite, that, you know, that finally comes around and play, but not through Batman, through this other, you know, method. But still, that's always a way to bring a guy into something anyway. Vibe, what an interesting character, you know, to be out of focus with things and not really in reality. I can't wait to see what they do with him. I'm gonna go and pick up his issue now because I'm through this. I'm excited to read it. Along with Green Arrow, I jumped off of him long ago, and after reading this, I'm hearing good things about what's going on over there, so I might jump on that because I love his depiction in this issue too. You know, he's got the big shocker at the end. Stargirl, I don't know much about her. I know she's another one of Jones's creations. I'm going to have to go back and find out about her because she seems pretty interesting. I'd say the best thing about this whole issue is, you know, Martian Manhunter popping up at the end, actually being there the whole time, listening to this conversation that they're having about this team that they want to put together to really be the answer to the Justice League. It's kind of weird. It's a weird public face. I would think they'd go another way with some of the characters, but, you know, I'm interested to see what's going on. You know, obviously Vibe's the good guy, and Stargirl, they're going to be main focus in public eyes. It's just to see. I love Baz, and obviously, you know, Johns might have knew he was leaving early on and created Baz to bring on with him here because, you know, the guy loves Green Lantern, so he's got to have his Green Lantern here somewhere. He's not in Justice League, so he's got to have one here. And I love it because I'm a Green Lantern guy, so, you know, it's cool. The page with the graph of the answer to the Justice League where they have everybody mapped out is incredible. I love, like, the answer to everybody. You have Martian Manhunter for Superman. Obviously, that's awesome. Catwoman for Batman. Who'd have figured Steve Trevor would have brought her in? Crazy, but hey, I love it. Katana, I don't know much about, but with Wonder Woman, got to check it out. And Baz with Hal, we got to see what's going on with the Third Army, but Green Lantern against Green Lantern, good answer. Vibe and Flash, guy out of focus with reality, kind of always out of focus. Flash is, he's the fastest guy on Earth. He's always out of focus. So it's a good match. Stargirl and Cyborg, don't know much of the connection in there. Hawkman and Aquaman, obviously awesome duel up there. It's almost like the game that's coming up, Injustice. I'm so psyched about that one, by the way, just to go off on a little quick side tangent. If you check out YouTube right now, they're doing matches for the little game they've got coming up for Injustice, the fighting game of DC, and it's awesome little matches every week. They're putting people together. Go check that out. It's cool. You'll like it. But anyway, Justice League of America, good stuff. I'm sad for John leaving Green Lantern, but I'm glad that he's moving on to other things that apparently he loves, because again, it's good stuff, and the guy I think is going to be bringing good material all the time. So great job on the show, guys. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for calling about both of those books. Actually, I want to talk about the Red Hood and the Outlaws one really quick. One of the things I really loved about that issue is, with everything that's happened with Jason and the amount of time that's passed, I'm a big fan of growth of a character, especially when you've got a character like him who had such a negative relationship with Bruce when he returned. And you see now where, over time, there's that need for him to have a moment with Bruce. And Bruce needed it too, although I don't think Bruce would vocalize it maybe the way that Jason did with his internal dialogue. But with what we saw with the Zero issue, and with what happened with Jason, did the Joker make me? I didn't make you. The Joker didn't make you. You made you. And that can't be changed. And I think we as people all can relate to that. I think there comes a point in time in our life where we need some validation that we are self-driven, that we have the power to kind of outgrow our upbringing and go beyond it. And so, yeah, there's elements in there. How much is what the Joker say the truth? How much is what Batman said is the truth as far as, those elements? What matters less about that for Jason is where he's at now, the path he's on now. No matter what happened with Puppet Masters and all that kind of stuff, there comes a point where you mature and you take control of your own destiny. Events happen to you. People try to do things to you. But in the end, how you react to them and where you go as a person is as a result of your own self-drive, your own self-motivation. And that was the cool part of that issue. The moments he had with Alfred, which is where Alfred is absolutely so brilliant, and with Dick Grayson and with Damian, I think to me are things I want to see more with this character. And I hope we get a chance to revisit this continually with Jason, where he will pop in from time to time and you'll see him, I don't know, soften is the right word or whatever. I like the way this relationship is. He always has a home there. Alfred references that. And Jason in his own mind is referencing, I feel that too. And his look on those formative years have softened, and he's looking at things a little differently. And doesn't change where he went, the path that he went, but he's a different guy. And Bruce gives him something in those moments that he walks away from that will impact him. This story will impact him because he has grown. I liked seeing that. Post Death of the Family, this is, post all of that now. So the family, yes, has splintered and kind of, to a certain extent, they've been changed by all this, but there is still, now there's a softening of that. It's funny that Jason's one of the early people to come back and have that moment with Bruce. And yet it's fitting, because he seems like the bold one that would need to. And for his own purposes and his own reasons. And he's in that place, because he's been through so much of this in a way. The moments with Dick Grayson about Starfire, I thought was priceless. I'm a huge fan of the Starfire-Dick Grayson relationship, the classic one. And I know, there's some vagueness as far as, like, how much of that happened, because, the Teen Titans as we knew them in the past didn't happen. But there was a relationship there, and it's a relationship that was important enough to Dick Grayson that he had to have that moment saying, look out for her. And we see there how much the relationship with Starfire as a friend means to Jason Todd. He is going to look out for her. And I think he met every word of it. And in those two, in that moment, you see, the friction that was there. And honestly, that friction was always there before Jason's death between the two of them. With Jason being the first guy, the middle child that takes over the role of the Robin, for that Dick Grayson's role beforehand, becomes his replacement. That between brothers in that moment. My brother and I had years of stuff like that. Not on just died and came back, but I think that's a natural thing. My brother and I are in a different place now. We've matured there. Dick Grayson and Jason Todd are not there. But it's funny how in that moment, I think that's the first opening of a door between the two of them where they could. And, that slow journey that people take to get to a certain point in a relationship. And I think that's really cool. I have a ton of respect now for my brother, and we've gone to a whole different place where I think we respect each other for who we are. We're very different people, but we get that. And I think that's something that was neat about this story. It felt natural, it felt real, and I really dug that about this story. So that was cool. And the Damien moments, obviously, with the Arsenal that you mentioned, I thought were really neat. Jump into JLA. I loved the premise and the setup for this team. It's in the real world nowadays, if there's this team that's running around that's full of these superpowered characters and they are not under, quote unquote, under government control, they are your most powerful heroes. The government's got to take a look at that and say, we've got to protect ourselves. And the premise of looking at who are people that can stand toe to toe with and possibly negate these characters makes sense to me. And they go to some classic rivalries for that I really love and set up an interesting team dynamic. Seeing Geoff Johns back on board with Hawkman for me is a geek out thing. I want to see what he's going to do with this character. It's the Geoff Johns solo. First of all, Geoff Johns bringing him back in JSA, and then the solo series that Geoff Johns and James Robinson kicked off that led into Gray and Palmiotti really cemented me as a Hawkman fan. So this is somebody who really needs to get back into this character. I think as the character has gone on in the New 52, the character has gotten nothing but better. But now we're at a point where we really need some high impact from Hawkman. I want to see it. And I think this team book is the way to get that again. I'm sad that his solo series is being canceled, but I think he's evolved to the point where we need to see him in this place. And I'm looking forward to that with Hawkman, because this is a character that is important to me, and I want to see him have that big, high impact in the DC Universe. Katana and Vibe, interesting choices. You were mentioning how seeing how she would be the one to stand up against Wonder Woman. I think her solo series is going to develop that more. I think we're going to see the same thing with Vibe in his solo series. They're two characters that can be fleshed out more. Katana, for me, previously, I know she was most recently on the Birds of Prey, but before that was an outsider, Batman and the Outsiders. I always saw her in a team book in that sense. Never seen her on the heavy hitter teams like this. To see her in this role, I think to me is super cool. And it's a great chance now with her own solo series to see an exploration of her. And I think we're going to see more and more how this warrior can stand up against the Amazon warrior. And it's going to be an interesting relationship for us as the reader to develop. And Vibe, the same way. I want to see him as a solo character, see him fleshed out and introduced. I read portions of the Detroit League. I got to admit, when he was on that team, I didn't read every issue of it. I'm not a Vibe aficionado. I don't know enough about the character, so I'm not saying anything negative about the character for fans of the character. It was not an era financially where I was reading consistently every month the Justice League. I've read stories with Vibe, familiar with who the character is, but I want to see who the character is today. I'm very excited for that solo series because of the initial kickoff of this issue. And the kickoff at the end, there is this secret society being put together. Ollie knows who the leader is, but he goes out cold before he can reveal it. That's how you do a cliffhanger in a series, where you're introducing all the characters, why they're there, get us excited about them, leave us with a hook to come back for more. Again, this is Geoff Johns at his best. This is what he does. It was a gorgeous-looking book. What a great initial kickoff first issue. And this is exactly what I love about comics, high-impact time. And DC needs these type of impacts right now to be coming out there, because Marvel's kicking up their game with the Marvel Now program. And I think it's great that these guys, to me, as readers, when both companies are putting out amazing output, we only benefit because they all step up their games to, kind of go up against it. That's what I love about the rivalry. DC versus Marvel, I want both companies doing well. I want independent companies doing well. I want all of comics doing well, because the better they're all doing, the more incentive, the more excitement is generated by creative to get things out there that keep us talking and get us excited. And I think it's just a great time to be a fan for this. And then this type of product that we're talking about right now is exactly why. Two very great issues, and thanks for calling about them both. That's our last voicemail for this episode, but also gets current to all our voicemails. I'm now all caught up on all voicemails, so please consider calling into the show voicemail line. We love having you part of the show. It's at the end of the podcast. We do a shout-out to it, but also it's always on our website, in our show notes. This is really, to me, one of the keys of our podcast is the interactivity. We get it in our Facebook group. We get it on all of the social media sites and stuff like that, but it's really in the Facebook group and through voicemails that, to me, are the most enjoyable experiences if you're looking for more participation in the podcast. Please consider being a part of both of those opportunities because we love having you a part of the show.
Spinning with great speed, the Flash creates a protective vacuum around himself.
I want to shout out our show voicemail line, which is 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. That's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. It's always available in our show notes and on our show website, ragingbullets.com. There's always news on ragingbullets.com where you can find out where our show's going next. I try to post a couple of times during the week telling people what the status of the show is, what we've been recording, where we think we're heading as time goes on. There's always new things that pop up and new ideas where we have opportunities to do recordings, and I try to keep you in the know. We are on Twitter. We are on Facebook. We are on Google+. Speaking of Facebook, I really want to shout out our Facebook group. We have an amazing group of people that are constantly having discussions there. It's always cool to see what people are shouting out that they've read this week or where they think characters might be going, their thoughts on creative teams. It's a great place and a great opportunity to chat. We also have friends that shout out their blogs, their podcasts, things like that are linked in and out of DC Comics. That discussion group has really grown beyond just being about DC Comics. It's really great to see the community there, and I want to thank everyone that participates during the week. As a person who's podcasting, and it's great for me, like when we're in the middle of the show recordings, we take a little break for a few seconds. I like to go pop over there and just see what people are discussing. It's fun for me to get that kind of feedback. It's like I'm hanging. So please consider joining our Facebook group if you're not already a member. It's a great community. I want to shout out episode 350. It's coming up down the road at the end of March. And it looks like it's going to be end of March, beginning of April. It depends on how timing works out. We're going to have 349 and 350, or 350 and 351. I'm not sure how this is going to play out. We're doing a Frank Miller-focused episode. We're going to be taking a look at Batman Year One, Batman The Dark Knight Returns, looking at both the original comic series and the recently released 2-part animated series. And we're going to take a look at The Dark Knight Strikes Again. Some of these things are items that Jim has never read, which is kind of cool from that perspective, or things that he hasn't read in a long time, and I'm in the same boat. It's great to revisit that from a contemporary standpoint. Year One has also been turned into an animated feature, so we're going to talk about that kind of casually as we discuss Year One and how that came in. So it's kind of neat to talk about and do a focused topic on that, because it's a big anniversary for us. We're going to be hitting 7 years at the end of March, so we're going to do a 2-parter to end off our 7th year and begin our 8th year in podcasting. So we hope you will all join us for that. And if you have any comments that you want to put together for that episode about any of those particular books or animated features, please start thinking about putting them together. We would love to have your participation in that episode. Also, if you want to send in anything on that 2-parter about the show, a podcast, anything you want to shout out about hitting episode 350 or 7 years of the podcast, we love that. Whether it's parodies of the show, comments. I'm going to do a contest relating to that episode. I haven't put it together yet. I've got some ideas in my head, and I will be shouting out further details of that later. But I wanted to let everyone know where we're going with that big anniversary show. It's coming up very, very soon, in about a month. And I will be, on our next episode, I'll make sure to announce a contest that will relate to episode 350 as well. Our sponsors this episode are once again DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Be sure to go to DCBService.com and check out that 50% off deal on the DC New 52 bundle. Remember, that's 50% off $83.74, gets you all 52 titles. That's really great if you're collecting them in paper and you want to get the whole bundle. It's a great, convenient way to shop and buy them and also get that amazing deal. They're also doing a 50% off deal on all new DC trades and hardcovers, so it's great to stop over there. On top of their countless other deals that they're offering on their website. Remember that they are a digital partner from Diamond Digital, iVerse, and Comixology as well. Every one of your purchases that you're already making digitally, if you go to their website, click on the link from our website, click on it from our show notes, pop on over there and do your purchases from their website. 5% of your purchases that you're already making starts building credit towards your DCB service order. If you go into your account settings and link your account from those digital sites, you are going to start earning money towards your purchases, which is great. You know, that quickly adds up to maybe get free shipping then, or, you know, you get money off a book. Depending on how much digital shopping you do, it adds up very, very fast. So I want to thank DCBService.com for offering that very cool feature. Over at InStockTrades.com, tons and tons of Green Lantern material. We talk about Green Lantern in this episode, and we're talking about it next episode, is available at 45% off. It's a great way to get hardcovers or trades to stock up if you haven't been reading this, or maybe you got a friend that just jumped on board or has been considering jumping on board. Terrific material. But War of the Green Lanterns hardcover, $29.99 regularly, 45% off, $16.49. War of the Green Lanterns trade paperback, $16.99 regularly, 45% off, only $9.34. It's cool that you have the option to go either hardcover or trade. Fit it into your budget. Start stocking up on them. Remembering, if you do like order $50 or more, you get free shipping. So that's, again, additional savings on those purchases. I want to thank those great websites for making comics fun and affordable. Our next episode will continue our Green Lantern discussion. We will have Myron joining us again, and we're going to talk about Green Lantern 17, Green Lantern Corps 17, Green Lantern New Guardians 17. Plus, we're going to take a look at the new series Threshold. We're going to talk about issue number 2. So that'll all be next week. We will see you then.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Fated for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see your plan and what you do